Welcome to Election Night Live, Golden Eagle Productions' live production of the 2020 election. I'm Maury Phillips.
And I'm Ramona Hernandez. Thank you for joining us today in this live broadcast.
This show is done in partnership with the John Brown University Communications Department, the Political Science Department, the Threefold Advocate, and IMX. Our big board is presented courtesy of 270 to Win. Results tonight are provided by the Associated Press. Footage for some of tonight's segments are presented courtesy of PBS and CNN.
We've got a big show lineup for you tonight. We'll cover some major races throughout the state of Arkansas and the United States, featuring in-depth reporting and analysis of all the big news that come in tonight.
We'll also be bringing on some different guests throughout the duration of this broadcast. Featured guests tonight include Arkansas Congressman Steve Womack and his Democratic opponent Celeste Williams, political commentator David French, and national radio host Eric Metaxas, as well as Miguel Rivera, Daniel Bennett, and many more.
In the first hour of our broadcast, we'll hear from some of our reporters of some of the state's important races, and at the near bottom half hour, we'll bring in some of our analytical team to talk about the notable races around the country, including the presidential race between Republican President Donald Trump and his Democratic opponent, former Vice President Joe Biden. They'll discuss about some of their pathways to victory for both candidates, and they'll give us their predictions for that race.
It's going to be a great show, and we're glad that you're joining us for what will be a very eventful night. We've already got some major news on the presidential race. Numerous states have already been called. Our analyst, Ben Martin, is at the big board. Ben, what have you got for us?
Yeah, so far we've had a lot of numbers come in. Trump has won a lot of the Midwest, and Biden characteristically has won a lot of the Northeast. New Mexico, Illinois, Virginia, New York, some of the big states. But also we've had Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, and up through that area, Tennessee, Kentucky. The electoral score right now is 119 to 194, so we'll have to see more as information comes in.
And we will keep you updated throughout the night on that and many other races around the state and around the country. But first, let's get to some more news.
Residents of Silent Springs may have noticed a variety of political signs around the city and displayed in local businesses. Our reporter, Gabriela Arocena, talked with local business representatives about how they approach the election and respecting customers and citizens who may have different viewpoints.
National elections are just a few weeks away, and Silent Springs is being filled up with political signs in places all over town. Many of these places are popular downtown businesses that report having interesting experiences following their decision to publicly show their political views.
My name is Matt, and my business is Pure Joy Ice Cream. I'm pretty active in politics and kind of knowing who's running for office and wanting to support candidates that I think are wanting to create a stronger community and more inclusive society. And so, yeah, I tell everybody I put up every sign for every candidate who asked me to put up a sign. I think a lot of business owners, there's kind of that tension of like, they don't talk much about politics. And so as soon as they put up a sign, people will assume certain things about them.
Arthur Holbert, after hosting a candidate forum on October 22nd, states that the citizens of Salem are very engaged in the election without demonstrating a division sentiment.
Throughout history, there's always been, people disagreeing. I would probably have to say that the Civil War people were probably a little more divided than they are now, because fortunately we're not at war with ourselves. We did have, strong opinions both ways. It is pretty polarized, but I think our country's pretty strong and we'll get through it. So I think it's been more divided. And I think a lot of times maybe the media even plays it up more so than it really is.
Now we welcome Gabriela to the show to talk some more about this. Gabriela, how would you say the general reaction has been among members of the Silent Springs community to these signs?
Hi. Well, I think that Silent Springs community has been really tolerant to these signs. The overall, there has been no reaction, really a strong reaction to them. People go along with their lives with them on the businesses.
And are business leaders affected in any way by what signs are presented in their windows?
Not really. There has been a few incidents, but overall there were not really any business related repercussions for them. Not any lower in their sales or anything like that.
Yeah. Now, overall, what is the general message being provided here on respecting customers and their differing viewpoints?
Well, I think that a lot of business owners told me that they will put out the signs that candidates will ask them to. So I just feel like it was more of like they trying to bring awareness that voting is important rather than choosing what candidate they were voting for, really.
Thanks, Gabriella. Now for our first race preview of the evening. Reporter Megan Sumter has been checking in with candidates for the Siloam Springs Board of Directors for positions 6 and 7. She attended a candidate forum on October 22nd, hosted by the Siloam Springs Board of Directors. This is her report.
For many Arkansas residents living in the Siloam Springs area, November 3rd means more than just the presidential election. Siloam Springs board member positions 6 and 7 are on the local ballot tonight. Ms. Mindy Hunt, a member of the board not on the current ballot, explains the board's importance and purpose.
Top of the hierarchy is the citizens, because they're the ones who vote for us. We answer to them. And in Siloam, there are 7 total board members. Most importantly, if you're registered to vote in Arkansas, please get out and vote.
The candidates were recorded at the Siloam Springs Board Member Forum, held at the Siloam Springs Library. For position 6, we have Miss Carol Smiley, the incumbent, and her challenger, Nathaniel Stone.
I'm Carol Smiley, and I'm your current Board of Director for position 6. I've always believed in transparency and in listening to all sides of the debate.
Ms. Smiley states, "My goal is to help guide our community through orderly growth, maintain fiscal stability, and provide a better quality of life for all citizens. My vision will maintain the economic vitality of Siloam Springs and preserve the historical charm of the city. Through citizen support, we will continue to make this the community where you are proud to work, play, raise your family, and retire."
My name is Nathaniel Stone. There's several businesses that, even in the past year, that have wanted to move to Siloam, and they've pulled out because it's just been too difficult for them. They'll go through all the hoops, they'll get engineering done.
Stone states, "My vision is simple. I think individuals are so creative and so unique. We each have traits that help out the community. Each of us has created a unique community, and I believe we should have freedom to grow around what is best for our community. I'd like to look at long-term goals because those are the things that will stick. Thinking big and making small steps forward is what provides change." For position 7, we have incumbent Bob Coleman and challenger David Allen. Unfortunately, David Allen was unable to attend the forum, so a JBU intern from Kansas, Miss Jenna Heimrich, read Mr. Allen's pre-prepared speech.
Coleman and I am running for re-election to position 7 on the board of directors. So we just need to let people know where Siloam is, what we have as benefits, and encourage them to come take a look.
Mr. Allen states, "I want Siloam Springs to be the quaint and loving community it was when I was growing up. I love progress, but that progress does not mean changing the city. Siloam Springs must retain its own identity. My vision is to cut our utility rates. I do not believe that our city should be hurting the pocketbook of our citizens." As the excitement for the presidential election continues to rise, the Siloam Springs board member candidates no doubt are holding their breath for the results of the local election. I'm Megan Sumter, reporter for JBU's 2020 election night broadcast. Thank you and good night.
Thank you, Megan. So what are some of the issues that are being faced by the city of Siloam Springs?
Well, I think for the most part, it's about infrastructure, fixing roads, starting new homes and businesses, and really that is just basically boosting the economy.
Okay, now with that being said, what are some of the priorities for the city in this next year?
I would say, again, building roads and also just bringing businesses to the city of Siloam Springs.
Awesome, thanks Megan. So now we're going to go into the next preview of the evening. The region's voters are deciding on who will serve in the state House and Senate seats come January. Races our team are tracking include State Senate District 1 with Bart Hester facing challenger Renetta Francis, and State District 2 with incumbent Jim Harrod facing Ryan Craig. In House District 87, incumbent Robin Lutstrom faces Michael Bennett Spears, and in House District 91, Bennett Gross is not seeking another term. Nick Jones, a Democrat, and Daniela Hick, a Republican, are vying for that seat. Here's a report summarizing those 4 races.
As Arkansans line up at the polls to cast their final ballots on Election Day, they are choosing who will represent them in the Arkansas State House and Senate. In Northwest Arkansas, the incumbent for House District 87, Republican Robin Lundstrom, is facing Democratic candidate Michael Bennett Spears. Lundstrom has served in the State House of Representatives since 2014. She serves on multiple State House committees, including the House Insurance and Commerce Committee and the Joint Committee on Energy.
The reason for government is simple: liberty. You've been a part of helping me, and I would very much appreciate your vote this next election. It is the number one thing we can do, and we can help by luring businesses into Arkansas by having a good business climate so that those wages can go up.
As an openly LGBTQ+ candidate, Bennett Spears' platform focuses on creating strong communities with a living wage, a safe and stable home, and the freedom to live without discrimination, according to his campaign website.
So as I said, my name is Michael Bennett Spears, dedicated to being a helper, to leaving this world better than I found it. My approach is ensuring that we have a strong, robust economy where our people are making enough money to buy a home and be secure financially, and ensure that those homes they do live in are safe and stable for them. Because at the end of the day, our job as government officials is to protect the people, to serve the people, to ensure that they are strong.
For District 91, Democratic candidate Nick Jones is facing Republican candidate Delia Hawk. Jones, an Air Force veteran, said in an interview with the Arkansas Times, "My platform will be based around issues that are important to me, my family, and my district. I'm running on smart growth, rural resilience, and a commitment to care for the most vulnerable in our communities, like our children and veterans." In an interview with 4029 News, Hawk, a former professor of business at John Brown University, described internet broadband access as the biggest problem for her district. It has impacted a lot of students, teachers, families without internet access. It also impacts their healthcare access if they don't have broadband. Telehealth for our rural hospitals and offices and things like that need to be connected. In the Arkansas Senate races, Democratic candidate Renetta Francis is challenging incumbent Republican Bart Hester for District 1. Francis, in an interview with 4029 News, described the biggest issue for District 1, saying, "One of the things I think is tremendously important for District 1 is making sure that we are being as welcoming and inclusive as possible. Our district is growing by leaps and bounds every day and becoming so much more diverse." In the same interview, Hester stated that voters in District 1 are focused on the economy and jobs. "And we're doing really well in Northwest Arkansas compared to the rest of the state, or compared to a lot of the country. And so we're really fortunate about that. But look, it's important that we continue to push forward. It's important that we worry about those that have lost their job because of government restrictions and shutoffs during COVID." In District 2, incumbent Republican Jim Hendren is facing Democratic candidate Ryan Craig. In an interview with the Northwest Arkansas Democrat Gazette, Hendren described the recent hate crime legislation that he introduced.
So I am Jim Hendren from Gravette. Government's function is to solve problems and to make it possible for people to realize the American dream.
If you go out and intentionally target someone because of their race, their gender, or their sexual orientation, or many of the other categories that we have listed, if that's the motivating factor and we can prove it with no doubt, then we as a society are going to say that is especially egregious and will have an enhanced penalty.
We'll have a lot of things that I want to accomplish in the next 2 years. So if I'm fortunate enough to get your vote and go back down, I'm going to continue to work on those issues that we've worked on since I've been in the House almost 20 years ago, and that is making Arkansas the greatest place that I know.
With hours left in this election, it will be up to Northwest Arkansas voters on who they think will best represent them at the Arkansas Capitol. This is Catherine Nolte reporting for the Threefold Advocate and Election Night Live 2020.
Let's get to our next race preview of the evening. This one is on the Arkansas 3rd Congressional District race between Republican Steve Womack, Democrat Celeste Williams, and Libertarian Michael Colegius. Here's the report. The Arkansas 3rd Congressional District seat, currently held by Republican Congressman Steve Womack, is up for grabs in this election. Womack is running for a 6th term in Congress, but he is facing opposition from Democrat Celeste Williams and Libertarian Michael Colegius. Celeste Williams is a nurse practitioner who has been outspoken on healthcare and the COVID-19 pandemic. She has been critical of the United States government's response to the pandemic, and she has vowed to never vote to cut Social Security or Medicare. Williams also said that one of her goals, if elected, is to make health care more affordable.
We need leaders who will create a roadmap to a better future. A future where none of us go broke because we get sick.
Michael Kalagius ran against Womack in 2018 and finished third with 2.6% of the vote. The U.S. Navy veteran and retired public school teacher has been critical of the two-party system, and he's also called for balancing the budget, fixing health care, passing term limits amendments, and cutting pay and benefits for elected officials in an effort to end corruption in politics.
Look at your children. Think about your grandchildren. Before they make their first mortgage payment, before they buy their first car, get their first job, take that first student loan, before their first day in school, their first steps, or even their first breath, they are already $80,000 in debt. We need to fix that.
Womack, who has been in Congress since 2011, said in an interview last week that he believed the three most important issues in the country were unifying Congress, being strong on foreign policy, and focusing policies on the deficit and the nation's debt. Congressman Womack is still the favorite to win this race, as the 3rd District is considered to be solid red. We will continue to monitor the outcome of this one throughout the night. This is Ori Phillips reporting for Golden Eagle Productions and Election Night Live. Now let's go to the next preview. This one is for the U.S. Senate race between Republican Tom Cotton and Libertarian Ricky Harrington Jr. Here's the report. There are many key battles across the country for the Senate majority. While the Senate race in Arkansas is not one that will go a long way in determining which party ultimately wins the majority, it is the first time that one of the country's most well-known senators is running for re-election in this position. Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton over the last 4 years has become one of President Donald Trump's most vocal supporters. His support of Trump has allowed him to position himself as a possible contender for the Republican presidential nomination in 2024, but he's still being challenged for a Senate seat in 2020. Libertarian Ricky Harrington Jr. is running against Senator Cotton. On policy, Harrington has been outspoken in calling for criminal justice reform and changes to the nation's systems on health care and foreign policy.
What we need to do right now as a people is come together and work together. And I give you my word that as your senator, I will work for the people.
He's the only candidate running against Senator Cotton, as the Democrats will not be fielding a candidate in this race, and progressive independent Dan Whitfield did not have enough signatures to make the ballot. According to the Arkansas poll released on October 28th, Cotton has a large lead over Harrington, carrying 75% to Harrington's 20%. Tom Cotton is clearly favored to win, but this race should still be an important indicator on his level of approval in the state of Arkansas. A big win here could further his momentum for a potential 2024 run, so this is still a race to monitor in the natural state. For Golden Eagle Productions and Election Night Live, this is Ori Phillips reporting. And we have some breaking news on that race, actually. The Associated Press is reporting that Cotton has, in fact, won re-election to the Senate. We'll go ahead now and get to our final race preview of the evening, this time on the race for the White House between Republican incumbent Donald Trump and Democrat Joe Biden. Here's the report. The race for the White House is always hotly contested, but the 2020 presidential election may be the best example of that in recent years.
And if I don't sound like a typical Washington politician, it's because I'm not a politician.
I've dealt with guys like Trump my whole life. So have you. Guys who think because they have a lot more money that they're better than you.
The battle between Republican President Donald Trump and former Democratic Vice President Joe Biden is one that has been the talk of the country for most of the year, and it will likely continue to be a major story up until the inauguration in January. In regard to policy, Trump has largely kept the same platform as when he ran the first time, with a huge focus on jobs and the economy, including a pledge to add 10 million jobs in 10 months and to deliver an income tax cut.
Next year will be the greatest economic year in the history of our country. You see what's happening.
Biden, on the other hand, has adopted policies that have become more popular recently within the Democratic Party, including a climate deal that will see a $2 trillion investment in green energy and an expansion of the Affordable Care Act. The COVID-19 pandemic has also been a topic that has been frequently discussed on the campaign trail, while Trump has spoken positively on his administration's response to the pandemic and the country's trajectory on COVID-19.
Deaths are way down, and where people are getting better, but I'm an example of it.
Biden has criticized Trump for not doing enough.
We've lost more than 220,000 lives of this virus already. But this administration has just given up.
In most polls, Joe Biden is the heavy favorite to defeat Trump and win the White House, with many polls showing Biden ahead nationally. The polls are also giving Joe Biden a comfortable edge in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, and slight edges in Florida, North Carolina, Arizona, and Georgia. Meanwhile, Trump has small leads in Ohio, Iowa, and Texas. Even though this will be one of the most hotly contested elections in recent memory, it is unlikely that we will know the official results quickly, as numerous states, including Pennsylvania, a state that many experts believe could decide the election, are unlikely to have enough ballots counted to make an official call in favor of either Trump or Biden on election night. Couple that with the possibility for legal battles similar to the ones we saw in the 2000 election between George W. Bush and Al Gore, and it looks extremely likely that the final counts for the presidential election will be delayed. Regardless, the country is anxiously awaiting a conclusion to this eventful saga. Will President Trump win re-election, or will former Vice President Biden make him the first one-term president in almost 30 years? We'll just have to wait and find out. For Golden Eagle Productions and Election Night Live, this is Ori Phillips reporting. Now we're going to introduce the rest of our analytical team, which you will see throughout the night as they will come on to report and analyze the latest numbers that are available. You've already seen Bella Bennett, the team's leading analyst. I have her colleague Ben Martin at the news desk with me, and Lauren West, the third member of this team, is at the big board. So Ben, I just want to start out by asking you, what is at stake politically on this night?
So right now we obviously have the president up for election. There's a lot of swing states in play, although Trump is currently leading in Florida. In terms of what's at stake, there's a lot of race issues at play, definitely economics. We've had the coronavirus pandemic, which has had a drastic effect on the economy. And then we have obviously new tax laws that will come into play if the election flips towards Biden.
Yeah, now I want to talk about the Senate because, again, the majority is very much in play. What are some notable races around the country to be looking at that could affect who wins the majority?
So right now we have several key Senate races that are going on, and notably in Maine, where the Republican incumbent is losing ground, but also in Arizona, where we have a Republican incumbent that could potentially flip.
And regarding the presidential election, there's a lot we could get into, but please provide an overview over what's happened over the last few months leading up to this night.
So a lot has happened over the last few months, obviously. We've had the pandemic that's been going on as we wait for a vaccine. We've had a lot of promises from the Trump administration. And then obviously the Joe Biden campaign is able to counter and say this is what we would have been done differently. So both have run very interesting campaigns, and excited to see what happens.
Now your team has made a prediction of your own going into this night. We'll now show the map at the big board with most of the states filled with only the key swing states left empty. Let's go to Lauren West. She is at the big board. Lauren, please first describe what is up here at the moment.
Yes, so what is up here, we have our predictions based off of historical precedent and what most of the states typically do, so we've got those filled out. We did leave blank swing states, notably this year we have Texas, which is looking like a toss-up at the moment, and so yeah.
Now let's go back to Ben. We'll start with some of the red states here, just predicting these. Again, these are just predictions based off of pre-election polling data. But we'll first start with some of the red states that Democrats and Joe Biden, they made big pushes for, starting with Texas, the Lone Star State. We know that Democrats, they almost defeated Ted Cruz in the midterms a couple years ago. How does your team see the presidential race panning out tonight in the Lone Star State?
Yeah, so despite it being a relatively close race, Trump is currently leading by a few points, so it's looking like it's going to go in his favor, although we have to wait for all of the ballots to come in and be counted, but it is looking like a Trump victory in Texas so far.
Lauren?
Yes, so I just put in for Texas that it will go red, and now we're looking at 233 for Biden and 186 for Trump.
And again, these are predictions. Arizona is a state that Democrats have made a hard push at over the last few years, and it's probably the red state that, according to a lot of pre-election polling data, they're most likely to flip in this election for Joe Biden. Does your team see that happening?
Yes, we are thinking that Arizona will possibly flip. We have a Republican incumbent, like I said, that will probably be flipping over to a Democratic Senate seat right now. Mark Kelly obviously campaigning in that state. So it's looking like a Biden victory in Arizona.
And Lauren, what does that do to the map?
To the map now with that new projection, we're seeing that Biden will have 244 and 186 for Trump.
and that puts him really close to 270. We'll go now to North Carolina, a state that has voted Republican in 9 out of the last 10 presidential elections. Some do say, though, that Joe Biden has really got a good chance to flip this state in his favor in this election. Ben, does your team see that happening?
Probably not. It looks like Trump is currently leading in Florida, so it's probably going to be a Trump victory in Florida, especially considering his close ties to the government, to the governor of Florida. So it's looking like a Trump victory in Florida.
And how about North Carolina?
And in North Carolina, we don't know, actually. We're predicting it's probably going to flip towards Biden, although it's kind of hard to tell considering its voting history. But given vast voter turnout, it's probably going to go towards Biden.
And now let's see what that does to the election map. Lauren, what do you have for us?
Yes, now that we've added in our predictions for North Carolina and Florida, we're showing 215 for Trump and 259 for Biden.
So according to our predictions, Joe Biden very close to hitting 270. So now moving along at looking at this, let's just keep moving on. Some blue states that are kind of swing states here in this election. So regarding the next state, Michigan's a state that Trump won in 2016, though Joe Biden has a pretty comfortable lead in the polls there. Does Trump pull any surprises?
We're predicting that Joe Biden is probably going to win Michigan, given the current polling data. So pretty standard stuff in Michigan. We're looking like it's going to follow suit and vote for Joe Biden.
And that does give Biden 270 at 275 now. Lauren, show us the map real quick.
Yes, so now Biden has his 275 electoral votes if our predictions are correct.
Now we'll just keep moving forward to see how the rest of these swing states pan out. Looking at Wisconsin, Trump won it in 2016, but it's another state where Joe Biden has a lot of an edge, at least in terms of polling. His chances of getting to 270 go up immensely if he wins there. And it would take some pressure off of Trump if he wins Pennsylvania, or it would take some pressure off of Trump if he wins Wisconsin, so he wouldn't have to exactly win Pennsylvania or Michigan to get to 270, but does he win the Badger State?
We're predicting that Wisconsin is probably going to have a lot of parallels to Michigan. We're thinking it is going to go blue this election, so that's what we should expect.
And Pennsylvania, meanwhile, that's a state that many experts, they think it could very well decide the election. It voted blue from 1992 to 2012, but Trump was able to win it by less than a point in the 2016 election. Most experts think that, again, he'll need this to win. Does he do so?
Yeah, so we're thinking it may come down to Pennsylvania if it is going to come down to any state, although we are predicting that it will go blue and vote for Joe Biden.
And then looking at the map, where does that put us?
Yes, so currently that will put us with an even bigger lead for Biden at 305, with Trump having 215 electoral votes.
And then the last remaining state there appears to be Ohio, another state that Trump won. Does your team see Joe Biden winning Ohio, though?
Most polling sources really think Ohio is very much up in the air in terms of where it's going to go. We're thinking it's probably going to go towards Trump, although things could change as the ballots come in.
So it looks like the final projection, if you look at the big board over there from our team, is Biden at 305, Trump at 233. Lauren, what are your thoughts?
Yes, so this is our projections for the night tonight, but obviously some of the swing states can do different things. It's happened last time, and it might happen again.
So Ben, what ultimately led you guys to make this prediction? You have Biden winning the White House. It's not close, but it's not a landslide either. What ultimately led to this prediction?
Yeah, so we just looked at a lot of historic polling data. We looked at how states have voted in the past, which really informs decisions now. Really just based on all the most popular polling information, although that is a risk considering the huge upset in 2016. Everyone was predicting that Clinton would win despite Trump's victory. But we were more inclined to follow the polling data because we think they may be more reserved in their predictions this year to prevent the same sort of thing from happening again.
Yes, and remember, these are all predictions. We'll go back with the actual data again. We do have states that have already been called, and we reported that at the beginning of the show. Thanks, Ben and Lauren. This won't be the last time that you see them, as they'll check in with us throughout the evening. And they'll be giving us, the numbers and the news as they come in. And Bella Bennett actually also will be joining us later on in the show. Now, Ben Martin got a chance to sit down and talk to John Brown University Associate Professor of Political Science Daniel Bennett about the election. Here's their conversation.
My name is Ben Martin. I'm here today with Dr. Daniel Bennett, Associate Professor of Political Science. We're observing all COVID-19 social distancing protocols. So We're over 6 feet apart, so we'll unmask. So Dr. Bennett, what are the key issues that voters are going to have in their minds when heading to the ballot box?
Well, like any election, the economy is going to be a big one for voters. Usually in any election, how the economy is doing will dictate the result. In many ways, President Trump had the advantage going in to 2020 on the economy, which is why even though it's been a traditionally, or rather a very non-traditional presidency, the fact that the economy was doing so well seemed to make him the favorite. And then, of course, with the pandemic, that changed the economic outlook, and now we are where we are right now. Of course, so the economy is still a big deal for voters, but it's inextricably linked to the pandemic, which is probably the second most important thing on people's minds. And on both of those fronts, the president is fighting from behind. I think that's where the former Vice President Joe Biden has a winning message, which shows in the fact that he is actually performing very well in the polling. And we'll see what happens on election night.
Okay. Does the COVID pandemic and the general negative reception of our nation's response lead to the possibility of the incumbency advantage holding less weight than usual this year?
That's a great question. So typically the incumbency advantage holds that the incumbent, especially the incumbent president, is going to have a built-in edge or advantage when it comes to re-election. In fact, we haven't had a sitting president lose re-election since 1992. So it's been some time since we've had that. But given the unprecedented nature of this election and the fact that we're in the midst of a once-a-century health crisis, you would imagine that the incumbency advantage could actually be an albatross around the sitting president's neck, right? Joe Biden is able to say, here's what I would have done differently, whereas Donald Trump is stuck with, here's what I've done. And for a lot of people, at least a majority of the public, it hasn't been a good response. And so in that sense, you're almost seeing the incumbency advantage as being a bit of a hindrance for the president.
Now, moving to voting itself, how could this election be impacted by widespread mail-in voting? And could the election results be delayed? And if so, by how long?
So a lot of it depends on how close the election actually is on Tuesday the 3rd. It's possible that we'll know the results relatively quickly, only by looking at the projections combined with what's actually come in by the 3rd, or on the 3rd, I should say. But if it's a close election and the race is going to be decided by a few states with a good number of mail-in ballots, then yes, it could be several days before the results are not only officially known, but just known in general. And so there could be an interim period between election day and when the results are known that there could be even crazier drama unfolding about this election. My guess is we'll generally have a pretty good idea on election night who will have won. But again, it's always possible, and it would be a very 2020 thing to have this presidential election that just has not been able to end continue on for a few days or even a few weeks more.
Now, almost every major poll shows President Trump down nationally as opposed to Joe Biden. In some polls, the margin between the two is in the double digits. However, Trump has shown a tendency to outperform the polls before, as his upset over Hillary Clinton in 2016 still somewhat puzzles many experts. Is something similar to his 2016 upset possible in 2020?
Well, I think anything's possible. I do think if you look at 2016 and compare it to 2020, there are some pretty significant differences. Number one, the polling in 2016 was a little more volatile than it's been in 2020. Joe Biden has held his lead at the state levels and national levels at fairly consistent levels for several weeks, if not months. And so you're not seeing the volatility that was present in 2016. Aside from the personality of both candidates in 2016, where both were considered highly unpopular, Joe Biden doesn't really seem to have that level of disapproval that Hillary Clinton did as the Democratic nominee. But I think the most important thing to keep in mind is that, yes, while the polls may be fundamentally off in 2020 as they were in 2016, at least in different states, pollsters learned something about how to survey certain voters and sample and weight their surveys in appropriate ways. So one of the things they learned in 2016 was that their surveys were based on assumptions about who would actually vote in 2016 that were outdated or did not account for the groundswell of enthusiasm for President Trump, or then candidate Donald Trump. So this time around, I think polls are being more conscious to make sure that some of these otherwise overlooked supporters for Donald Trump, non-college educated white voters, are being sampled and weighted accordingly in the surveys. And if that's indeed happening, and this is still what we're getting for Joe Biden, it could be a pretty long election night for Donald Trump.
So if the Republicans lose the House and Trump loses the election, what does the future of Trumpism look like? Will it still live on, but in different leaders, or will the Republican Party shift to a more moderate platform?
If the election turns out the way that polling suggests that it might, I think we're about ready to see a full-fledged civil war in the Republican Party between advocates for a Trumpian style of politics, the outsider, the people appealing to a populist message and railing against the government, and those within the government seeking to bring the Republican Party back to a more traditionally conservative perspective. On the one hand, you might have people like Ben Sasse, Marco Rubio, or even Mike Lee from Utah making a case for a more respectable and traditionally conservative Republican Party. On the other hand, you might see folks like Josh Hawley in Missouri embracing a more populist style of conservative politics that it would appeal to some of Donald Trump's voters. Tom Cotton could arguably also make that argument. Or you could have a complete embrace of Trumpism with someone like Donald Trump Jr. running for president in 2020, or even Donald Trump himself, who would only be 78 years old. And by the way, even if Donald Trump does not win the election, it's highly unlikely he'll just disappear into the background. He'll still have his Twitter account. He'll very likely have a large television presence somewhere, which would also be unprecedented for former presidents to do that after losing office. So I think we are in the midst. I forgot to mention Nikki Haley as well, the former Secretary of State and South Carolina governor, not Secretary of State, ambassador to the UN. And Nikki Haley would be the one to try to pull the Republican Party in a more traditionally conservative direction. But if Donald Trump loses in 2020, we're out for 4 years of absolute warfare for the soul of the Republican Party.
What does the future of the Democratic Party look like if Trump wins and Republicans maintain control of the Senate?
Well, I think you're similarly to what I said about Republicans facing a civil war if Donald Trump loses re-election. If Joe Biden loses the election, there's going to be a lot of more progressive elements of the party who said this is why we should have nominated someone with more progressive credentials, someone like Bernie Sanders. Younger voters in the Democratic Party may not be particularly enthused by Joe Biden as a candidate, but they're certainly supporting him because of what Donald Trump represents. If he loses, that support for Joe Biden is going to be quickly erased, and there's going to be much more pressure for the next time around for the Democratic Party to become even more, or embrace left-wing views even more so. So Joe Biden has said in his general election campaign, for example, well, look, I don't agree with something like abolishing or defunding the police around the country, or even the idea of a Green New Deal strikes me as maybe a little bit too much or too progressive. In 2024, if the Democrats are running after 8 years out of the White House, there's going to be a lot of pressure on the more fringe elements of the party to try to seize control of the future of the party, which is arguably what happened in 2016 with Donald Trump, right? Republicans were coming out of 8 years of the Obama administration, and it's maybe no surprise that someone like Donald Trump, who is speaking this harsh language about Republican priorities that may or may not have resonated with the more polished members of the party, he ended up winning that primary election. And so it's possible you could see a similar dynamic play out in 2024 if Joe Biden loses this election.
Are there any candidates, either locally or nationally, who have impressed you with their campaign strategies?
I think nationally, I have been impressed with Joe Biden's ability to thread the needle between the conservative, or rather I've been impressed with Joe Biden's ability to thread the needle between the progressive wing of his party and the more moderate or pragmatic wing of his party. This has always been a challenge for the Democratic Party, balancing the old style New Deal Democratic coalition with the younger, more left-wing or even radical elements of the Democratic Party, but Biden's done a pretty good job with that. He himself is no political radical, right? He's about as traditionally moderate as you can get on most issues. But he's still convinced the more radical or fringe elements of progressivism within the party that he is acceptable to them. I suppose I've also been impressed by Sarah Gideon's campaign up in Maine. Susan Collins is a long-term incumbent Republican senator with a reputation for being sort of a maverick within the Republican Party. She's been known to buck her party's wishes on a number of issues. But Sarah Gideon has been able to convince the voters that Susan Collins is in league with Donald Trump. And while Susan Collins has voted in favor of many of Donald Trump's priorities, she's also bucked him in a number of ways, including voting against his nominee to the United States Supreme Court, Amy Coney Barrett, just recently. But Sarah Gideon has definitely emphasized that relationship between Susan Collins and Donald Trump, and given Donald Trump's disapproval, I don't think Susan Collins is going to have as easy a time overcoming it as she may have just 6 years ago.
Do you see Amy Coney Barrett's Supreme Court nomination to have a significant impact on the election? And what do you see happening after the election on either side, no matter who wins?
I'm not sure I would expect her recent confirmation to change the existing dynamic of the race. I had always thought that if the president was trying to be a little more savvy, he would almost hold the Barrett nomination out as a carrot and say, look, I don't think we should fill this right away, but for the sake of the country, I'm being a little magnanimous here. I'm going to wait and see what the people decide. And with that seat up for grabs, it's possible that could have motivated more conservative voters to turn out. But as for with her being confirmed recently, I don't know if it's going to have any fundamental results or effects on the election. It certainly has the potential to fire up Democrats after the election, and assuming Joe Biden does win and Democrats do retake the Senate, there's going to be extraordinary pressure by those on the left of the Democratic Party to respond to her confirmation. And there's already been talk about, should we pack the court? Should we add the number of justices to the Supreme Court? Should we change the court in other ways? And there's nothing unconstitutional about that. The Constitution leaves those decisions to Congress. And so I think that's possible that we'll see that pressure in the months ahead. But as far as Amy Coney Barrett's confirmation itself, I don't think Americans know or care enough about the courts to have that be the deciding issue in the election. I think the impact of her confirmation will be felt in the months and years to come.
Do you have any final thoughts or things you'd like to add?
I would just encourage people following the election returns to not get discouraged if we don't have voting and results right away. It simply means it's taking a while to count all the votes that have come in on Tuesday the 3rd, and also through the mail over the previous several weeks. Not knowing the results of an election right away is not evidence of fraud or attempting to change the results. Or if one candidate is up on election night and then as more results come in, that candidate's lead slowly diminishes. Again, that's not evidence of fraud. It's simply evidence that everybody's vote is being counted. And as we've seen in this election, actually, Democrats are more likely to vote by mail and more likely to vote early. And if those votes take longer to count, that could actually affect the outcome in several states. I'm not sure that it will, but I would just caution people not to be too hasty in looking for a winner on election night.
Thank you.
Great interview there by our own Ben Martin, and we appreciate Dr. Daniel Bennett for taking the time. Now we'll go ahead and take a quick break before coming back with more news, numbers, and Haley Bullington will also be joining us in a few minutes. All that and more coming up on Election Night Live.
At John Brown University, earns a competitive salary. To do that, you'll need to figure out what you want to do with your life and equip yourself to succeed. At JBU, we care about who you are and what God has in store for your life. That's why our professors will know your name and personally invest in your success using our three-part approach to education: head, heart, and hand. We'll challenge you to move beyond facts into creative and independent thinking. Our community is a place where you'll belong and be encouraged to put Christ over all. You'll be equipped to impress employers, do good work, and make a difference in the lives of others. So apply now. And in the meantime, schedule a visit so you can stop worrying about the future and start equipping yourself for a successful career and a life of purpose.
Welcome back into Election Night Live. I'm Maury Phillips. Now going to some more news, our own Matthew Campbell talked to some members of the JBU community to see how they're feeling about the election. Here's his report.
As the 2020 presidential election approaches, I went around John Brown University's campus and talked to a few different students to see if they'd be participating in voting this year. Here's what they had to say.
My name is Hudson Dick, and I'm a freshman at John Brown University. I plan on voting in the 2020 presidential election.
My name's Elizabeth Rainey, and I plan on voting in the 2020 election.
Hi, my name is William Newton, and I plan on voting in the 2020 election.
Hi, I'm Chloe Stokes, and I do not plan on voting in the 2020 election.
I'm Zachary Wold, and I plan on voting in the 2020 election.
My name is Jared Herndon, and I plan on voting in the 2020 election.
I'm Anne-Marie Sullivan, and I plan on voting in the 2020 election.
I'm Matthew Campbell. Thanks for watching.
Great report there from Matthew Campbell. It seems like many JBU students are getting involved in this election. What do you know, or what do you think this says actually about the JBU community being so involved?
Yeah, I think this really shows just how involved our students are and how willing they are to initiate change.
Yeah, and did you get an idea regarding this type of thing on which candidate perhaps the JBU community might be favoring, at least in the presidential election?
I didn't specifically ask what each student's political view was. I just wanted to see whether or not they were wanting to be involved in the election and voting.
Yeah, and now that's a great report from Matthew. We appreciate it. We're going to go ahead now and take another quick break and come back. Haley Bullington is joining Armando Hernandez in the studio, and we'll be right back with that coming up on Election Night Live.
Young men and women.
I know things seem uncertain and difficult for you.
For us all, really.
However, I want to encourage each of you to continue working towards your athletic and academic goals.
I know the spring still seems like forever.
And in some ways, it is.
In the grand scheme of life, it's but a mere blip on your journey.
Stay focused and lean on Him, for He will guide you along the way.
Don't forget this time was taken from you and use that to fuel your drive.
Remember, your word is a lamp unto my feet
and a light unto my path.
I know this time is a heartbreak for all of you.
It is for us fans also.
I am not retired and I love watching basketball and soccer teams.
And even have begun watching the volleyball team last year.
We all pray for you and hope you can start your seasons as soon as it's safe. God bless.
This pandemic can't stop the energy and heartbeat of the JBU student athletes. You all rock.
Work hard, stay focused, never give up,
and continue to honor Christ in first place in all you do.
Live for Him.
Praying for each of you to prosper in your faith during times of testing.
It will make you better and stronger by the resistance you go through.
God bless you. Keep working and keep your eyes on Jesus.
Run the race set before you and you will overcome.
Remember, this too shall pass. Go JBU.
We just want to say thank you
for your encouragement, for your love and support.
It means the world, and we appreciate you all so much.
We can't wait to see you in the next semester.
We are so blessed to have such an incredible support system. Keep loving the Lord and loving JBU. Go Golden Eagles.
All right, now let's go to Armando Hernandez. He is in our brand new podcast studio for our first live interview of the evening. He's with Haley Bullington, president of YAF, talking to her about her political involvement on campus. Armando, take it away.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Armando Hernandez. I am here with Haley Bullington, president of YAF here at JBU. Haley, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you, Armando?
Doing pretty good myself. Just waiting to see how everything pans out tonight.
Oh, yeah.
So, today, I have a couple questions for you regarding how you are being politically active here at JBU, all right?
All right.
So, to start off with this question. Could you please give us an overview of your political involvement or activism here on the JBU campus?
Oh yeah, for sure. So when I first came to JBU, I wasn't like super into politics, mostly like how most college kids are. They're trying to figure out their path and where they're going. And the more I started like coming up with my own vision and like seeing the world through my lens, I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. This is like, I'm feeling called to do a change. And the more I sat back and watched about what was going on campus and just like things that are going on in the world, I was like, JBU really needs like another club or something that's a little bit more active and like is pushing more. And so I felt called to start YAF back in March, and I worked on it until clear September. One of the recent events that we have done on JBU's campus for activism is we did a partnership with Because I Care, and we registered a bunch of voters on campus to get them out there. We didn't care who voted, which way or what. We just wanted people to vote and get out and let their voices be heard and be out there.
Okay, awesome. And just so the public knows, YAF stands for Young Americans for Freedom, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, awesome. So can you tell us, the people, what's the general beliefs?
Freedom, and there's Young Americans Foundation. And our biggest belief and like our home hitter is bringing conservatism to campus. Kids being punished for being more conservative in their papers and their work. And our job as YAF is to make sure that like we keep things neutral between professors and students, that we keep things neutral to the world instead of keeping it so divided. Because like you see right now, everything's like cutthroat, super divided, and like we don't want that. We want more unity and to bring more common ground into it. Like you could disagree with me and I disagree with you, and we have a common, like we commonly disagree, but we do it civilized instead of being so harsh towards each other. My chapter, especially on campus, I primarily focused on like the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness, because like that's kind of what America's like founded on, is those three principles, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's where I'm trying to take it. This is the first year out, so it's a little testing the waters and figuring it all out.
Yeah, for sure. So then could you tell us, like, what's the group's future like for like years ahead, maybe a year from now, 5 years from now? Where do you see the group heading towards?
I hope to see it to continue to grow. It's grown a lot since September when we became official on campus. I want it to get the sponsorships that it needs. I want to see big speakers come in like Ben Shapiro and all of them and just rally students and just get them educated and informed about what's going on in the world. I want to see us do a lot bigger events than what we're doing now, because like right now it's the building year. The building years are the hardest years because like I want to do all these big things and fun things, but I don't have the funds or the resources to do it right now. Mm-hmm. And so it's just keeping in mind that like I'm not building for this year, I'm building for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road when I'm not here anymore, but can come back and see how much it's grown. And I'm really excited to see in years to come when I'm graduated from my doctorate schools and all that, mm-hmm. of how much has grown. And yeah, I want to see it just prosper. That's what I want. I want to see it just explode.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, for sure. And that's definitely that we aspire and like admire, for sure.
Yeah.
So then could you tell us, how important is it for the youth of America to be politically knowledgeable and involved?
I believe that this year especially, with it being an election year, is very important to know what's going on in the world and what's going on in the politic world. Froze.
Yeah, you're good.
We're good.
You're
We're
good.
Just educating yourself, knowing your facts and not your theories. If you're curious about something, go and look it up and like research it. We have time. We have the whole world at our fingertips with our phones and our computers. Mm-hmm. You can form your own opinion without the need of TV or hearsay, you know? You can go and research and find things and understand things and form your own thoughts and belief system. And I believe that's super important for especially us being in college as 20-year-olds to form that strong foundation underneath us.
Mm-hmm. So then what advice would you give for young people who are wanting to become more involved, whether they are Republican, Democrat, or Independent? What advice would you give to them?
I would give them the advice, like what I said, educate yourself. It solely comes down to knowing what's going on in the world, what's going on around you, what's going on in your city, what's going on just in general. It's very important to know. If you have questions, ask them. I talk to my elders. I respect their opinion. I know they've been through it, they've seen it. Mm-hmm. And by talking to them, I have formed a lot of my opinions, but I've also seen the spectrum from growing up in the technology era where things are a lot different than it was for them back then. And so just knowing that I can just look things up, talk to them, read a book about something, go and research, talk. There's so many different news channels out now. There's so many different like social media podcasts. There's so many resources that you can go and educate yourself and learn. And I believe if people just go out and learn and they get curious, humans are naturally curious. They want to know what's going on. They want to like ask questions. But I feel like most people are scared to. And if they just take that fear and turn it into faith and like go and just push themselves off the cliff a little bit and go research, that they'll form a strong belief system within themselves of what they believe and what they want to project to other people that they believe.
No, awesome. Thanks. Haley, do you have any other comments or questions you would like to state? Anything, especially with today being the election day?
You know, everything's kind of divided, and it makes me sad to see like the student body and just America in general so divided and cutthroat right now. And regardless of like who wins and who loses, ultimately at the end of the day, our God is who's in control. And I feel like we need to try to get back to that and like focus on that more than anything. So win or lose, whoever wins, whoever loses, if your candidate wins or loses, keep in mind at the end of the day that God's number one and he's the one in control. So.
All right, awesome. Haley, thank you for coming on with us today. All right, we'll head it back to you, Ori, and we'll see what else is going on in the Election Live broadcast.
All right, let's get into some more news. We actually have a couple of Senate races here to confirm. In Kentucky, we can confirm that Mitch McConnell has defeated Amy McGrath to keep his seat in the Senate. And we can also confirm that in Colorado, John Hickenlooper has defeated Cory Gardner to keep his seat in the Senate. Let's get into some more news. Starting with the poll workers. In every election, there are thousands of poll workers working hard to provide a safe, efficient environment at the polls. Reporter Rhea Brown got a chance to cover this. This is her report.
Election inspectors have had their hands full for the last few weeks as early voting starts up in Arkansas and throughout the country. I'm Rhea Brown with an inside look on what it's like to work the polls in 2020. Election inspectors, or what many often simply call poll workers, complete a variety of tasks during the election period. From helping voters register and issuing ballots to educating voters about how the process works, to actually counting the votes, election inspectors work to ensure that the voting process goes smoothly for everyone involved. I visited the Siloam Springs Community Building, one of the voting locations in Siloam Springs, to get a closer look at what the day-to-day job of a poll worker looks like.
I'm just checking in voters. It's been a lot of fun being able to see all of the people I know in the community. That I sit there and I check people in all day long. I think it's going very smoothly. We have some really awesome machines and a new system set up to where it just makes things flow. So we don't have really kind of the bogged down check-in systems anymore. So things are going pretty quickly. Being a voter, I've just noticed that people are just able to get in and out real quick this year.
Huffaker also said that the younger generation has really stepped up to help protect those who may be at greater risk during the season due to COVID-19.
So I think the young crowd is starting to kind of pick up and fill in those gaps for maybe the older generation who are at high risk. Yeah. So I think that we've got a really good system going on with incoming people that are new and the veterans who have been here for a long time.
Channing Barker, Benton County Communications Director, said that poll workers are simply there to assist with the voting process and that they are nonpartisan people who have come to serve during this time because they felt called to do so. Barker also shed some light on the process of voting. You can view your sample ballot online so that you know what you're voting on and feel a little more prepared, which functions a bit like a practice run. On Election Day, there will be 30 voting sites to choose from in Benton County. When you walk in, there will be someone to greet you, get your information, and give you your ballot. They will direct you to a kiosk where you'll go through the voting process, and finally, a poll worker will also direct you to where to drop off your ballot. Thank you, viewers, for doing your part in the election process this term. I am Rhea Brown, reporting for Golden Eagle Productions and the Threefold Advocate.
It is 9 o'clock here on Election Night Live, and we got some more news to report. Rhea Brown has joined us. We'll get to her in a second. But our first key race that we are reporting on for the Senate, Lindsey Graham has won in South Carolina. AP confirms it, defeating Jamie Harrison. So Lindsey Graham, one of the most influential Republicans in the Senate, able to keep his seat for another 6 years. So now we'll go to Rhea Brown on the poll workers. Rhea, when you visited the polls, was it particularly busy?
No, but it should be noted that I went at about 10:30 in the morning on a weekday, which is, I imagine, not probably the busiest time at the polls. I was there for about 35 minutes. I counted somewhere between 10 and 15 people. But I would guess that, during lunch breaks and first thing in the morning and towards the end of the business day, it probably got quite a bit busier. But I did go during early voting season, and, I'm sure an influx of people was coming, in the last 2 or 3 days.
So besides Hannah, who you interviewed, of course, did you see any other younger poll workers?
No, actually, which really surprised me because she said she had worked with multiple, younger poll workers, and so I expected to see more. When she said that, I was, on the camera and I was looking around like, where are they? So I just that surprised me, and I've got friends from my home state who are younger, and they're working the polls, and so that was interesting to hear, but I didn't actually see any others, no.
So with tonight being election night, can you tell us about how the vote counting process is actually done?
Yeah, so in the state of Arkansas, it's actually, it's the machines that do the counting. That's pretty across the board. A lot of places, when you go into the voting location and fill out the ballot, you'll take your ballot to the box. It's sort of like I call it the robot box, and you'll put that in. And so from my understanding, the box counts the votes. Poll workers aren't technically responsible for that, but they are responsible for making sure that everyone understands the process and puts their ballot in correctly so that their vote can be counted.
Thanks, Rhea. Political observers have said 2020 voting turnout may be one of the highest in recent memory. Our own Megan Sumter did some reporting on early voting and how Benton County's early voting turnout compared to that of 2016. Here's her report.
There are many newcomers to the privileges of voting this election, some of whom are in the age range of 18 to 24 years old. In order to discover how adamant this age group is on voting in 2020, I interviewed 2 students regarding this issue. Here are their responses.
I'm Caleb McCarty. I'm 19, about to be 20. I did, yes. I just think it's important that we vote, especially if we want to make a difference as Christians. It's just a huge way we can impact an election, and I think we're called to make a difference, and so I think that's one way we should be doing it. That's why I vote.
Brett Odell, 20 years old. I have not voted yet. I'm considering it. I do not think I will. Part, it's the fact that I'm not as well informed as I would like to be. I don't feel as though the information I'm getting from, YouTube and news sources is particularly helpful. Whatever happens, I need to trust God. And so while I do hold fairly conservative views, God is still in control.
I also interviewed Ms. Channing Barker, who has some statistical data from the local polls on October 22nd.
For today's numbers, our biggest turnout is in the 35 to 44-year-old range. We had 132 people as of 11 o'clock that were between the ages of 18 and 24. We had 249 people that were between the ages of 25 and 34. And then from 35 to 44 years old, we had 435 people. 45 to 54, we had 355 people who had turned out to vote. 55 to 64-year-olds, we had 344 people turn out to vote. 65 to 74-year-olds, we had 252. 75 years old and up, we had 149. And every day that changes a little bit, but our 18 to 24 and our 25 to 34 ranges have not been seeing as much of a turnout as I think that people would assume. We've had over 55,000 voters turn out in the polls for early voting so far. So there's a lot of ways that you can vote in Arkansas, absentee, early, or day of election voting. You can get your vote in, get on with your day.
The interviews and data show that, while not entirely off the charts, voters ages 18 through 24 are considerably low. I am Megan Sumter, reporter for Golden Eagle Productions and the Threefold Advocate, for JBU's 2020 Election Night broadcast. Thank you, and good night.
Now we welcome back Megan Sumter. Megan, you did much of your reporting last week, so how did Benton County's early voting turnout look on the final day, which was on Monday?
Well, in Benton County alone, 88,000 people voted early, as well as 100 million voted early nationwide.
Okay, awesome. Now, I know that's a lot, obviously, definitely for sure, but looking at the Arkansas poll that was recently released annually, it consists of key polling data where we show where the state stands on a variety of issues. In this presidential election year, this data is necessarily important. Here is what Natalie Rogers reported.
The 22nd annual Arkansas poll, released last Wednesday, showed the Republican Party gaining strength among Arkansas voters and continuing a decade-long trend. The survey found overwhelming support for President Donald J. Trump and Senator Tom Cotton in their re-election bids. The survey results from 804 telephone interviews with randomly selected adult Arkansans. Interviews were conducted between October 9th and October 21st. Janine Perry, a professor of political science at the University of Arkansas, designs and analyzes the poll each year. Perry said healthcare, the economy, and politics for politicians were the top 3 concerns of this year's respondents. The survey found strong support for Republican candidates in 2 national races. 65% of respondents favored President Donald Trump and 32% favored Democrat Joe Biden. In the race for U.S. Senate, 75% of respondents favored incumbent Senator Tom Cotton, while 20% favored Libertarian candidate Ricky Harrington. Perry said the percentage of respondents identifying themselves as Republicans in this year's poll was 44%, an all-time high. The poll found voters most concerned about healthcare and the economy in wake of the coronavirus pandemic, while politics was a top issue for more than 20% of the respondents, for the first time in poll history. In looking at 3 state ballot issues, the poll found 62% favoring extending a half-cent sales tax for roads and highways. On issue 2, which would change term limits for state legislators, 60% of respondents found the measure appropriate. Respondents did not favor issue 3 on this year's ballot. Only 41% of those surveyed favored changing the requirements for ballot initiatives and references. In other sections of the poll, 44% of Arkansans said they strongly or somewhat supported the Black Lives Matter movement, while 52% said that they strongly or somewhat opposed it. This was the 22nd year for the Arkansas poll, and it was released by the University of Arkansas Department for Political Science. I'm Natalie Rogers, reporting for Golden Eagle Productions and the Threefold Advocate.
Thank you, Natalie. Now, you've given a great overview of the poll results. Were there any findings that stood out to you?
Yes, it was actually really intriguing to see that politics have become one of the most important issues in voting today, right? That kind of is indicative of our polarized state and how we deal with partisan politics today. It was also really interesting to find that in terms of climate change and things like that, and what we're considering in the polls in Arkansas, 64% said that they're not actually that concerned, which is intriguing because we begin to see a trend towards selfish partisanship and things that would affect probably further candidacy in terms of who we're picking as Arkansas.
Awesome. Thank you, Natalie. We'll go ahead and take a quick little break. We'll be coming back with some more news and numbers. Stay tuned on this Election Live night.
I feel that the spiritual life on campus kind of shows itself all over campus rather than in one particular space.
There are a lot of different on-campus opportunities for just investing in your faith and growing deeper with the Lord.
Our spiritual lives are not regulated to just the religious things that we do. That as followers of Christ, our spiritual formation involves everything that we do. We do provide a lot of different kinds of service opportunities. We call them cause ministry. There are creative things that we can do to spread the love of Christ really in a lot of different ways around us.
One of my favorites that I've been involved with is Growth Group. And as a freshman, that was really instrumental to me. I had some upperclassmen and some other freshmen who we just did life together. There's a fall break trip, there's spring break trips.
Our trips, rather than serve and save trips, like a mission trip, are focused on living with the people that we are going to see and learning with them and alongside of them.
Our chapel program is really designed to bring the community together.
Tuesday, Thursday, we have built-in chapel time, whether that's faculty speaking or they bring in guest speakers.
Because JBU is a small university and our faculty to student ratio is small, our students have the really incredible opportunity to get to know wise Christian people who have walked the road before them.
I really think JBU provides a lot of good spaces and places for people to grow together. I came into JBU not wanting really to go to JBU and was just like a little bit unsure of why I was at JBU, but I was clearly placed there for a reason, and everything kind of lined up for me at the same time. And if students are willing to tap into that, and I didn't think I would, and be willing to be wrong and be willing to grow, you're going to have a wonderful experience at JBU.
Hello, and welcome to the Post-Production Podcast. I'm Kiri.
And I'm Rachel. We are a student and a former student who think we are hilarious and also like to talk about our experiences in media production.
We're friends, too.
Sometimes.
Yeah. So on the Post-Production Podcast, what do?
We talk a lot. We'd like to share our knowledge with you.
Yes, advice you never asked for. That's our podcast.
Say one was interested in listening to a podcast about young adults in media. Kiri, where might they find Post-Production Podcast?
On Spotify and eventually Apple Podcasts.
If you're curious about what it's like to listen to two young adults ramble on about their experiences in media production, check us out on Spotify.
Yeah!
The Conversation is a podcast dedicated to long-form discussions with important public figures on the issues of the day, hosted by JBU student Ori Phillips. The podcast features long-form discussions with different local and national public figures, such as political commentator David French, conservative radio host Eric Metaxas, Arkansas Congressman Steve Womack, and more. New episodes are released on Fridays. You can listen to The Conversation on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Anchor, Breaker, Overcast, Pocket Casts, and Radio Public.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We're now going to head over to Ori Phillips, where he is in the podcasting room with another interview for us tonight.
Okay, I don't think here's his list of questions, just if you want to.
Okay.
Welcome back into Election Night Live. I'm Ori Phillips here in our brand spanking new podcast studio. And I'm here now with Mindy Hunt. Mindy Hunt is our second in-studio interview of the night. She is a member of the Siloam Springs Board of Directors, and she's on staff here at John Brown University. So, Ms. Hunt, you're a faculty member here at JBU, and you also serve on the Siloam Springs Board of Directors. How long have you served on the board?
I have served for 2 years. So in January will be exactly 2 years.
Yes. Now, just regarding some issues, what is how long are the typical terms for members of the Siloam Springs Board of Directors?
Right. Each member serves for 4 years, and we have elections every 2 years. We have 4 ward representatives and 3 at-large representatives, and so every 2 years, one set of those is being elected. So right now, we're voting on the at-large members, and then in 2 years, we'll be up for re-election or a new election for the ward representatives.
So how does the administrator form of municipal government different from the just kind of, the mayoral government form that some may be more familiar with?
Right, and people are more familiar with the mayoral form because that is definitely more the predominant type of government. Siloam Springs is somewhat unique in that we have the administrator form government, and what that means is the board of directors hires a city administrator that they feel like is qualified to do the work of the city, and then that city administrator really is the one to handle the day-to-day operations of the city, as opposed to the mayoral form of government. The mayor is the one that's responsible for the day-to-day operations.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit earlier in the show when we did a segment on it, but what are some of the issues that the board and the city of Siloam Springs will be addressing in the upcoming year?
Well, I just came from a board meeting myself. Came right here from the meeting, and one of the things that we voted on tonight was a rate study, a utility rate study. So that's the project that's going to be starting here pretty soon, supposed to be finishing up in June, and that will kind of help us plan out our or forecast our future for the next 5 years or so with some of the things that we're trying to do, infrastructure improvements. One major project that we've been looking at, it's a little bit on hold right now due to COVID, is some improvements to East Main Street from downtown up to about Lincoln Street, where Community Christian Fellowship Church is. That's an area of town that's sort of an entrance into the city, and it does need some improvements, but it's one of many streets that needs improved in Siloam. So that's always sort of at the forefront of our minds. What can we do to improve the streets, improve sidewalks? We're always thinking about safety, so we want to make sure that our police and fire departments have what they need to provide the safety that the citizens in the community want.
Yeah, and before we take it back to Armando at the news desk, any final thoughts on maybe on the election night or what's going on now tonight with the Siloam Springs Board of Directors? Anything there?
Well, I checked the results right before I came, and of course, what I was seeing were only the early voting results. So they're still counting all the votes that came in today, and both positions are very, very close right now. So we're voting for the ward or the positions 6 and 7, and both are very, very close.
Yes, very close, and we will keep everybody updated on that as the night progresses. That is Mindy Hunt. We appreciate your time, and now we'll take it back to Armando at the news desk.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Ori. Now we're going to be showing you an interview that was performed with Ori Phillips as he interviewed David French. This interview was actually recorded a couple weeks before the presidential election. This is the interview.
Welcome to The Conversation, a show dedicated to long-form discussions with important public figures on the big issues of the day. I'm Ori Phillips, your host, and today we welcome David French to The Conversation. Please kind of explain the Christian college experience to you.
My whole philosophy on college is really pretty simple. It's go to a college where you will thrive as a human being, period. And then, reach for the stars academically if you're choosing for grad school. But for college, these are such formative years. Go to a college where you're going to thrive as a human being.
Now, you've written extensively on religious liberty. You said that while it's under pressure and there are legitimate concerns, doomsaying is a bit much. Would you expand a bit on your views on that and the state of religious liberty in the United States?
So there's a difference between law and culture. It creates an interesting tension. A lot of Christians feel in their bones the cultural resistance, but they take for granted their legal rights. And so if you really drill down and you talk to people who are worried about the state of religion in America, most of the time when you really drill down, the real fear is more of the cultural minority status, more so than the legal exclusion, because you have a lot of tools to fight the legal exclusion.
In 2018, you tweeted that you no longer consider yourself to be a Republican. I kind of want to ask you about that, where you stand on the conservative movement right now. So what drew you to the Republican Party initially then, and then what drove you away?
Well, what drew me to the party is the same thing that drove me away. I came of age with a Republican Party that put forth candidates and men who were men of character who broadly shared my values. There's a two-part test. For me to vote for a person, they have to pass both parts. One, do they have a character that is sufficient that's commensurate for the office they seek? And so it's a higher bar the higher office you seek. And the other one, do their political values do they broadly share my political values? You fail either one of them, and I'm not going to vote for you. I don't take a lesser of two evils approach. I take a no evil approach. If they're of active poor character, I'm just not going to support them. And if a Republican Party wraps itself both arms around that person, now to such an extent that they didn't even have a Republican Party platform and preference for that person's agenda, then I'm not a part of that party. That's not what I signed up for.
Should Christians vote for Trump?
I think there are the two proper positions for Christians to take in this election are either to sit it out if your conscience will not allow you to vote for Joe Biden, or vote for Joe Biden. I think Donald Trump, in addition to having steered the ship of state into the rocky shoals we're in right now, in many ways the support for Donald Trump by Christians is in many ways bringing discredit to white American evangelical Christianity, in part because of the shocking amount of hypocrisy that we're seeing.
To listen to the full discussion, check out The Conversation with Ori Phillips, available wherever podcasts can be heard and on the Threefold Advocate website at advocate.jbu.edu. What you just saw there was a little bit of my near 50-minute conversation with political commentator David French. It is episode 1 on The Conversation. I host it. It's dedicated to bringing in some interesting folks, some interesting perspectives, and having long-form discussions with them. I've also talked to Steve Womack on there, Celeste Williams, as well as Eric Metaxas. In fact, we're going to go ahead now and play my conversation with Eric Metaxas from about 2 months ago. The Center for Faith and Flourishing, they were hosting an event, Should Christians Vote for Trump? Metaxas was a featured speaker, and I did get a chance to talk to him. Here is what we've got. You weren't a really big fan of Donald Trump.
Right.
You've said this before, but what really allowed him to grow on you? What were the defining moments that led you to be?
Well, it's interesting. I spent years not liking Donald Trump, and when he originally was running, I wasn't sure what to make of him. And there's a man sitting over there. You see that guy over there? He's a friend of mine, Tim Ragland, and we were talking on the phone, and he said, I think you're getting this wrong. You need to give him another look. This guy's like a folk hero. Listen to him out there on the stump. And I did, because I take Tim, who's an old friend's opinion, pretty seriously. And it really shocked me to hear Trump making so much sense. I thought to myself, I've never heard a politician talk like this in my life. It was absolutely stunning, because I thought, how can somebody who's so plain spoken and funny and just telling the truth and saying things you're not supposed to say, how could he be running for president? It is hugely refreshing. He's saying things that many of them I agree with, and it really surprised me. The other thing is, which I mentioned earlier, is that I thought it kind of funny then when he was being made fun of that he didn't know the Bible, or he and so I wrote a humor piece about that, kind of Trump Bible verses, like his version of what the Bible says, kind of making fun of him, not in a mean way, just kind of, and I sold it to the New Yorker, and one of them was something like, a good wife who can find, I found 3, Trump Bible, or and that is why a man will leave his parents and cleave to his wife for a season, like kind of just taking scripture, just twisting it a little bit. And so, but while I was writing that, I kind of found something about his voice. I don't mean the sound of his voice, but I mean the rhythm and the way that he spoke. It kind of reminded me of people that I grew up with, who, they're not where I am theologically or maybe politically exactly, but they're solid people. They're good people. You know that they'd have your back. And I found in a way that I saw him differently. I saw him like a New York character, like my friend Tim was saying, almost like a folk character who just says these things and stuff. So I was shocked. And then more and more, I just kept listening, and I kept thinking, he really is saying things that no other politician is saying. And I think he has the ability to get it done. In other words, a lot of politicians can talk about a lot of stuff, but to actually get it done and to fight against, the bureaucracy, which is tremendous. So, yeah, okay.
So when the Christian voter fills out their ballot in November, what issues do you think they will care about the most?
Well, there's no mythical Christian voter, but I think Christians have to care about the Constitution, because religious liberty, contrary to what some people have said, it is under absolutely superlatively grave threat. We have never in our history had all liberty, and specifically religious liberty, under threat. And it shouldn't just scare Christians, it should scare everybody. When the government can tell you what you can say and think or do, or that it can force somebody to bake a cake against their conscience. If somebody says to me, bake a cake that says Heil Hitler, and I'm a baker, and I have to do it? I don't think so, not in America. But if you get the wrong judges in, which the left would do for sure, that's going to be the America we live in, where certain people get to decide when you have freedom and when you don't. This is huge. This is incredibly serious. The abortion issue goes along with that. The right to life is fundamental. It's basic. We've had judges legislating from the bench against the will of the American people. Roe v. Wade was not a vote. It was Supreme Court justices deciding that they knew better than most of the people in most of the states. Same thing happened with Obergefell and same-sex marriage. We needed to have a debate all across America. Instead, we had a judiciary populated by Democrat appointed judges who said, we know better than most Americans. We don't care what they believe in most states. We've decided this is in the Constitution. Of course it's not. It's preposterous. But that kind of heavy-handedness, that kind of high-handedness, that kind of big government throwing your weight around, that is the mark of the Democratic Party. And every American has to understand that's the death of freedom in America. And if that happens, and if we have enough judges who begin to rule that way, and it becomes the law of the land, we will never be the America that we've been, and we will never become the America that we can be. People have to take it seriously. Not voting should not be an option.
So you just got done with an event here on the campus with David French. Should Christians vote for Trump? And you argued the pro-Trump position. Please kind of expand on some of the points that you made during this event.
Well, look, I think Christians have to vote for Trump for many, many reasons. Number one reason, he's not Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are a nightmare that if they were elected, people have no idea, because we've had reasonably good government and things have been fine for decades and decades. People have no idea the agenda of a Kamala Harris, the agenda of an Ilhan Omar, of an AOC. Pelosi and Biden do not have the ability to stand up to them, and they're fundamentally anti-American, anti-self-government liberty ideas. So just to preserve the status quo, just to preserve the ideals of the West, the ideals that bore fruit in this great thing called America, you have to vote for the person who gets that most. And Trump has appointed so many people who understand this and who have fought for this. I mentioned Betsy DeVos and school choice. That should be the ultimate issue of race. Do people in poor neighborhoods across America get to send their kids to the school that they want or not? The Democrats say no. And they don't even want to talk about this. Fighting the deep state is another thing. When you discover that there are people in the government who think they know better than the American voter, that is the definition of tyranny, the absolute definition. It's why we fought the revolution against King George. And 240-something years later, we have the exact same thing with the deep state of bureaucrats who have contempt for the American voter, who don't care that Trump was elected legitimately by the American voters. They just say, we know better, and we will use all the power we have to destroy the will of the American people, to subvert the will of the American people. So this is an issue for all Americans, and you know, unfortunately, things are so bad that if Trump were to lose, I think we would never be able to recover anything of the financial freedom and opportunity to begin with, but also of the ideals that the founders gave us, that Martin Luther King Jr. called a promissory note, that we're still living up to it. But if we go down that path away from the Martin Luther King Jr. path, which is a fundamentally Christian view of race reconciliation, the antithesis of the Marxist BLM view, it's over. It will hurt. The poorest of the poor will be hurt the most, but it will destroy America. And if you destroy America, you destroy the hope of the countries around the world that are looking to us for leadership and hoping that we can show them the way out of their own tyrannies that they're experiencing.
Hello again. Now I'm going to head it back to Ori Phillips. He was in the podcasting room right now. He's talking with Miguel Rivera, an adjunct political science professor here at JBU. Ori, to you now.
I'm Ori Phillips, now here with adjunct professor of political science, Miguel Rivera. He works here at John Brown University. How are you doing tonight on this? I mean, it's very busy, it's very hectic, but this is the election night experience.
Yeah, for those of us who follow politics as if it's a sport or that teach it, this is our Super Bowl.
Absolutely. Yeah, this has definitely been a big Super Bowl, I'll say. 2020, the big push, for mail-in voting with the pandemic, all of that. I mean, it's going to be a roller coaster ride. And I told you, off air, we do this for 3 hours, but the folks on MSNBC, CNN, Fox, they got to do this probably for solid 72, 96 hours, maybe more.
Yeah.
I mean, we really it's going to be a long ride. But so far, what are your thoughts concerning this election? Any interesting patterns among the swing states or anything just in general?
As you watch the vote totals being tabulated, what I've seen that I think is very, very interesting is that the Democrats are clearly winning the cities and the suburbs, but in almost all of the rural areas, the Republicans are winning. The states to really watch right now is that blue wall, right? It's Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, because I think that's going to be very, very important. The election could turn out exactly the way it did in 2016, except if Biden wins Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, he's president.
He's got the election. So, yeah, I mean, and as you're saying, Donald Trump, he has a path to victory, but he can't give up a whole lot of room. Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, if he loses all of those, he's lost the election. But based on your experience now, just going to your past experience as Deputy Attorney General in Indiana, what role do the states in the Midwest, again, like Wisconsin, but also Indiana, what role do those states play in the election?
Well, Indiana is almost always a red state.
Absolutely.
Right? And Biden didn't really stand any chance of actually winning it. Pence delivered it again. Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, those are important states because they're bellwether states. I think that Ohio has voted with the leader ever since 1856, I think. So the way that Ohio goes is going to tell us a lot. In fact, a Republican president has never won the presidency without winning the state of Ohio. So that state is important. Illinois, I think it has, 11, electoral votes. And Indiana's always Republican.
Yeah, and it's going to be very interesting. So now I want to ask, what is the likeliness of the Electoral College playing a determinant role this year in comparison with the 2016 election? A lot of people I've read, a lot of the pundits are saying that there's still a really good chance, if Trump wins the Electoral College, he's still probably not winning the popular vote. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, right now at, 9:32, I think that Trump is leading in the popular vote.
About 2 million.
Yeah, I expect that will change. The Electoral College obviously plays a very important role every single year, right? Or election, because that's how we actually elect a president. It's not a popular vote, it's through the, Electoral College. In 2016, we actually had a move amongst some of the electors to actually not vote in accordance with their state's popular vote. A lot of states have laws that mandate that electors vote in accordance with the popular vote. Some states don't, and it didn't turn out that they switched votes from Trump to Hillary or vice versa. But that'll be something to watch this year too. So the Electoral College, it's everything.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
And a popular vote isn't as we saw in 2016.
Yeah, and in the year 2000 as well, because I
Right.
believe didn't Al Gore win the popular vote, but George W. Bush, he won it by a hair, by a little bit.
By just I think it was just a few hundred votes in Florida.
Yeah, absolutely. And it could come down to this here, and there's been a big push on things like mail-in ballots. I know that the Republicans, they made a big push, don't count the ballots that are submitted after Election Day. What are your thoughts on that type of push, and how do you think mail-in ballots could affect the election?
Well, early voting and mail-in voting of this election cycle has been very strongly tilted towards Democrats. In-person voting is very strongly tilted towards Republicans. Different states are counting the votes differently. So some states are actually counting early voting and mail-in voting first, and then the election day voting second. Others, the exact opposite. And so what's going to occur is as you get these returns in early, it's going to look like Biden's winning or like Trump is winning. And then depending on the state and how they're counting those votes, we can see a big shift in that. In Pennsylvania, for example, which is a key state in this election cycle, the Supreme Court allowed them to count votes so long as they were postmarked by Election Day up to 3 days afterwards. Another state, I believe they had 9 days. Are those additional votes going to matter? It depends on how close that it is. Every vote needs to be counted in any way that we can increase the number of Americans voting and the number of opportunities to vote, while at the same time balancing that against any fears of fraud, et cetera, I think is only good for the country.
Yeah, so I know this next question we're going to be asking a lot of you, but who is most likely to win based off of the projected positions of the states?
Oh, boy.
A lot to take in.
No. That is a difficult question. I said to my class on Monday, because I was asked to make a prediction, if I had to predict, and of course as soon as I do, I'll be wrong, but if I had to predict, I would say that Biden is going to squeak out a win in the Electoral College. And then the big question comes, what are the Republicans, Trump, and the gang of lawyers that they've got, what are they going to do? And if that happens, I think there's going to be a lot of lawsuits. I think there's going to be a lot of tweets. I think there's going to be controversy, et cetera. And we'll have to see when December, I think it is 14th, rolls around and the Electoral College meets and votes, what happens.
It's going to be a long roller coaster. And yeah, I mean, as you said, it's going to be potential for lawsuits, potential for all sorts of things. I mean, I even read, the Trump team is already prepping potentially to challenge the results if possible. They got the lawyers ready to go and all of that. So, with all things considered, what are available paths to victory for each candidate in this race?
Well, like I said earlier, if Biden just has to win all the states that Hillary Clinton won, plus Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, and he's got it. He can lose one of those states, but pick up a state like Ohio or Arizona and, a couple of others. Biden has a lot more paths. Trump, on the other hand, has to do just as well as he did last time. He can't lose Florida. He needs to win North Carolina, and he needs to win Michigan, Wisconsin, or Pennsylvania, one of those. Biden has a lot more paths. Trump has a lot fewer. So we'll see. Right now, the last time I saw it, Trump was leading in Florida, and Trump was leading in Michigan. But again, it's how those votes are being counted and reported.
Yeah, and it's going to be very interesting. Looking at Florida, I know our analytical team, they've been tracking it really for the last few hours. And last I looked, it had Trump ahead by about 3 points, but I may be giving some outdated info on that. But Florida, I said it at the beginning of the show, it's the definition of a swing state.
Oh, yeah.
In the last 6 elections, it's been Republican 3 times, it's been Democrat 3 times. What has led to the state's mixed ideological status?
Yeah, what's really interesting about Florida is if you're a Floridian and you don't live in one of the 3 largest counties down in the southeast part of the state, you are primarily a Republican, especially in the Panhandle. However, if you live in one of those southeast 3 counties, you're a Democrat, and it's because of the demographics. Cuban Hispanic Americans are primarily in the South. They are primarily more Republican, except what's interesting about that is that the further south in Florida that you get, the more in the northeast part of the country that you get, which is more Democrat. And it's because of all the folks that have retired down to southern Florida. So you've got this sort of triple balance, right, between Floridians who were born and raised there, in the Panhandle and elsewhere who are more Republican leaning. You've got Cuban, Americans that are primarily more conservative. Then you have other Hispanics who are more Democrat, and then you have all those folks who move to Florida who are primarily Democrat. And so it depends on the voter turnout, it depends on the shifts, and it depends on what the predominant issues are, how Florida goes.
Yeah, and again, I know we kind of touched on this a little bit, but Florida, it is really close. It is a photo finish, perhaps. How do you see Florida shaking out? Do you think Biden's able to kind of make up that deficit that they're saying he has right now?
It depends in Florida, I think, on how many early voters and absentee voters voted. Because, again, those are primarily Democrat. That leans Democrat. So I think that's the number, because in Florida, you squeak out elections by a very few thousand votes. And so, 10,000 early voters, 20,000 mail-in votes, it could change it. I think Trump has, last time I looked about 45 minutes ago, he's got a fairly comfortable lead in Florida. I think he will probably squeak it out, but I do think that it's going to be up to those early votes and those mail-in votes, how Florida goes.
And I know this is a question a lot of us have been wondering. How long will it take to get the official results out? Because, again, with the mail-in votes, it's going to take a few days, perhaps a week, maybe. I don't know. I don't want to dabble in that too much. But how long do you think it could potentially take, and what impact do you think that might have on the outcome?
Well, the Trump campaign has clearly, for the last year and especially the last 3 or 4 months, have been pounding against mail-in voting and against early voting. And they have been doing that to set up an argument that on election night, when it looks like he has won some states, let's say that, hypothetically, that it looks like Trump has won Pennsylvania. Well, the Supreme Court has said that Pennsylvania can count votes for up to 3 days. Well, that might shift. And so the narrative that the Trump administration has been saying out there is that that's fraud. Well, it's not necessarily fraud. It is simply how those states counted those votes, and the fact that Democrats encouraged people to do early voting. Democrats encouraged people to do a mail-in voting, while Republicans did the exact opposite. So if the state is counting mail-in votes and early votes after election night votes, then it's going to feed into that Trump narrative. I do think that we probably aren't going to know the results for several days after the election. I do expect lawsuits. I do expect challenges. I hope it doesn't end up like Bush v. Gore, and that we end up with that kind of national drama. But I think it's very possible that it could head in that direction.
Yeah, and drawing out the election like that, I mean, obviously that wouldn't stand to benefit the country. I mean, if this is drawn out for a long time and we don't know the results, what type of impact do you think that will have on the country, not knowing for potentially weeks? I know that's, again, all speculation, but, prolonging that not knowing, just that uncertainty, what effect do you think that would have on the country?
Yeah, it's a different country than it was with Bush v. Gore, right, back in 2000. Social media is such a much bigger impact on our opinions and on what people think and on what people do. And the country is so divided that I think if it really goes out more than just days but starts to go into weeks, then you're going to have all sorts of conspiracy theories and things on Facebook, on Twitter, etc., that is going to feed the narrative that the Trump administration has already started, and it's going to cause a lot of folks to have doubts. And democracy is all about faith. It's all about faith and trust in our systems. It's all about faith and trust in the law and the Supreme Court and our elected officials and how things work. And when that faith starts to be eroded, when that trust starts to be eroded, democracy suffers. And so I worry about that.
Yeah, and I think we'll just about do it here for our interview. Do you have any final thoughts on the election? Maybe what can we expect in the days to come, or what you hope happens in the days to come?
Yeah, what I hope happens is that, let's say by the weekend, we know. that's a hope.
That's a hope. Will we get
right.
it?
And I hope that there aren't as many lawsuits and fights as I expect. What I would like to tell students is whatever happens, there's going to be half of us that are going to be sad, and there's going to be half of us that are going to be glad, but that's democracy. And whichever way that you are, there's a midterm election, and there's another presidential election in just 4 years, and that's the great thing about democracy.
Absolutely, and that's a great way to end it off. That is Miguel Rivera. We appreciate your time. Now let's take it back to the news desk with Armando.
Thank you, Ari and Professor Rivera. We're going to take a quick break, y'all, so stay tuned for This is the Election Night Live.
Enthroned you are the head of all creation, and yet you set your heart on humankind.
Your hands they reach to bring among the nations justice and peace. How can this be?
Upon your head we saw the crown of glory. Your heart perceived the greed we held inside.
Yet by your hand you set a plan unfolding, grace for our greed. How can this be?
With all you are, you show us mercy. All in us gives praise.
Our heads, Lord, we raise to behold you. Our hearts, Lord, we lay down before you.
Our hands, Lord, reclaim hope that once was lost. We praise you, Christ, over all. You stand ahead, protecting and restraining. Your heart is ever grieved by how we stray. Yet by your hand the way of man is changing. Love that won't cease. How can this be? With all you are, you show us mercy. All in us gives praise. Our heads, Lord, we raise to behold you. Our hearts, Lord, we lay down before you. Our hands, Lord, reclaim all that once was lost. We praise you, Christ, over all. With all you are, you show us mercy, yet we still forsake. With all we are, we leave you hurting, until death you stay. Upon your head we put a crown of scorning. We left your lifeless heart within the grave. Yet by your hands the grave was sealed his opening. How can this be? How can this be? Our hands, Lord, we raise to behold
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Election Live Night broadcast. Now we're going to go over with our analytical team some of the reviews that we have from some of the discussions that we have with recent races that are going on right now. So I'm going to hand it off to Bella and Ben as they're going to talk about some of the key races and keep us updated on what's going on right now. So Bella, can you please talk to us about what's going on with keep us some of the key Senate races that are happening right now and some of the results that came out from it?
Right, absolutely. Thank you so much, Armando. So right now, some of the key races that we're paying attention to are Kentucky, South Carolina, Colorado, and Alabama. As results have come in, we see that Mitch McConnell has won Kentucky. He won by a really, really wide percentage rate, about 22 points. And Lindsey Graham won his incumbent spot by about 20% as well. John Hickenlooper flipped the Colorado Senate for the Democrats. And Tommy Tuberville, a former football coach, flipped the Alabama Senate for the Republicans. So those have been really interesting races that we've been looking at throughout this whole election cycle, and it's interesting to see how they've come to a close.
No, for sure. And Ben?
Just some interesting Senate races going on right now. In Colorado, John Hickenlooper, former governor, has won over Cory Gardner's seat, thus flipping one of the Senate seats. One thing we're going to be keeping an eye on is Arizona. The results have not come in, but Democratic opponent Mark Kelly is leading by 11% against the incumbent Martha McSally.
All right, awesome. So is there any other key races that we're trying to keep an eye out for right now that we could see sort of changing the Senate and allowing the majority to happen?
Right, so right now it's kind of, it's difficult to tell right now. As Ben mentioned before, Arizona is a really, really important one to keep an eye on. Right now, the Democrats have a very small lead. They have 43 seats where Republicans have 41. They've each flipped one seat, so it'll be a close race, but it'll be a good one to keep an eye on.
Mm-hmm. Ben, do you have anything else to add on to that?
It's just they don't have to flip very many seats. I believe right now if they flip 2 seats and get the presidency, they'll maintain control. If they lose the presidency and flip 3 seats, they'll have control of the Senate.
All right, awesome. Now, with that being said, we're going to head over to our Celeste Williams interview, and who is running against Steve Womack here in the state of Arkansas.
Now we welcome Celeste Williams to the conversation. Williams is running as the Democratic nominee against Republican Congressman Steve Womack for the Arkansas 3rd Congressional District seat. Welcome to the show, Ms. Williams.
Thank you so much for having me.
How does your experience as a nurse influence your stance on the issues relating to the pandemic, perhaps your knowledge or just how you feel regarding just a lot of the action being done on this?
Yeah. So certainly when I heard about COVID before it was front page of every paper, I was deeply concerned. And I'm one of those weird people that have worried about a pandemic for a long time. I worry, in Northwest Arkansas, we have a lot of international travel, and certainly a lot of people travel to and from China doing business. And, I know that in Pakistan, there is wild polio. And so that has often been one of my worries, that someone's going to bring that back. And not necessarily a new virus, but this is a new virus. And so I was very concerned that this was going to be a big deal. And I didn't trust China's data that they were putting out on it. And I worried that it was much more deadly than what they were sort of letting on at first. And so, our response, testing was delayed, which put us behind. We still don't have adequate testing to get ahead of the virus and address the pandemic, which then causes continued economic pain for so many people. And it's been a total disruptor for everyone's lives. And, states have really been left to fend for themselves. There's still not a federal plan to address the virus. And I liken that to, as though we have been attacked by a foreign entity and the federal government just said, okay, states, you get your own weapons and you fight this battle and everybody's on their own. You got it. And that has not worked well at all. And so, the United States of America has unbelievable resources. We have unparalleled manufacturing capabilities, biotech expertise. We have experts that have, historically been housed in the CDC and the NIH. And we've really seen that expertise undermined by the federal government over and over again, which this then puts us behind the 8 ball, and we're not following basic public health principles. And, that has dire consequences for people who live here and their families. I mean, how many people are enjoying doing virtual school or worrying about their kids being at in-person school right now? It's just been so disruptive, and people losing their jobs, and we have record unemployment rate, and still we're not taking care of this virus appropriately.
Yeah, and I mean, go back to, January 2020, February, like we're seeing how this was going through China, going through Italy. I myself, I thought that, the United States, of all the countries, including in the Western world, we're the most equipped to handle this. And I think most people are not this, yes. So seeing how, months and months later, I mean, the entire world was still dealing with this, but seeing how it's still, we're wearing masks. I got mine right here, JBU, rocking the gold and blue. But yeah, so, I mean, seeing how this is still an issue, I'm sure it's frustrating, and people want to return to normal, and we're now experiencing fatigue. Yes. That's what a lot of experts are talking about. And so now, I mean, drawing that to how the country's handled it, I mean, and the state as well, because I do want to talk about the state of Arkansas. We're one of the few that did not have a stay-at-home order. Governor Asa Hutchinson, he's been met with some mixed reception. I've seen some people praise him, some people not so much. But, I mean, just looking at all of that, there's a lot to tackle there, but just what are your thoughts on the country's response some more, and also the state, because I also want to touch on that, because we did, again, have a very unique approach. Only one of a few states not do a stay-at-home order.
Yes, and I think we can continue to go about our lives. We need to ask people to do it in a safer way. And certainly I think that in times of crisis, historically, this country has come together, and it didn't take, a lot of leadership ability to say, this is our patriotic duty to all come together to defeat this virus, and to model appropriate behavior, such as just the basic stuff: wear a mask, wash your hands, watch your distance, and to caution people about the virus and to take it seriously. And that didn't and still isn't happening. And, I will absolutely, as a nurse, acknowledge not everybody is going to be deathly ill with this virus. Some people are going to be just fine, but it is that unpredictability of who is going to be harmed. And we know that the risk is much greater for our seniors and those who are immunocompromised. And I think that those people have value, and that we need, I believe that I was called to love my neighbor. And so asking someone to put a mask on their face to protect their neighbors isn't a big ask, in my opinion. And that, again, that is what public health experts are recommending. And that message has been undermined by the Trump administration. And you may not be sick, but maybe you get in a car accident and you need care at the hospital, but the hospital is overrun with COVID patients, and you have to sit in the ER for 8 to 12 hours or longer. And that delay, it makes it harder for everybody else to get the care that they need. And quite honestly, nurses and physicians and just about every single person that's working in healthcare right now, we are exhausted. We are absolutely exhausted. We are being asked to do more with fewer resources than we've ever been asked to do before. And, I believe that we have some of the most dedicated, brilliant, hardworking healthcare professionals in this country. But we're tired, and it is making it so hard to do our job and do it well. And people don't get into healthcare because they want to make $1 million. They get into healthcare because they care about people and they want to make a difference. And people right now are not feeling like they're able to do that because they're so overrun with COVID.
Now, moving forward on some other issues here, I want to touch on this as well. There's been a renewed emphasis over the last 6 or 7 months on confronting issues of race in the country, such as police brutality, racism in general. I mean, it's one of the most difficult issues we have to confront on a societal level. A lot of the conversations on it are very uncomfortable, but it is important to confront and build something that's better for the future. I mean, but how do we fix that? Is there a legislative fix? Is there a societal remedy or a moral solution in your mind?
I think it's all of the above on that. You know, I think we are uncomfortable as a country reviewing our history. We all want to just kind of move on. And I think that our history informs our present. And so I think that this is a conversation we've needed to have as a country. And, you know, our values as Americans and looking at our Constitution and our Declaration of Independence, we say that we believe all, which actually says all men are created equally. I would quibble with that and say all people are created equally. And, you know, I think that it is impossible to legislate away an individual's racism or an individual's, you know, you can't legislate an individual's thoughts. But what you can do is help create a structure and a system of equality so that we look at structures in our society and make sure that they create equal opportunities for everyone. And so, you know, I bring that back to thinking about from a healthcare framework, social determinants of health, making sure that every person in every zip code has the same opportunity for a healthy life. And that sounds funny, but the things that predict a healthy life are a good paying job, a safe neighborhood, opportunities for educational attainment, you know, making sure you have a job that you can meet all of your basic needs, and clean water and good transportation and all of those things. And if we really work as a society to make sure everybody has equal opportunity wherever they're from, whatever their zip code, then we're actually helping to improve equality everywhere. And absolutely, people of color face disproportionate violence and incarceration and all of those kind of things. But those same issues overlap with people who live in rural places and having inaccessibility to health care. And, you know, I think that we have to, you know, take the temperature down and like, let's just talk about what do we need to create an equitable, strong economy and society. And I think when you create opportunities for all individuals, then you strengthen families.
Yeah, now I want to specifically touch on the issue of police brutality. I watched your interview on Capitol View the other night, and you briefly also got a chance to touch on this. And, I mean, every reasonable person out there knows that the vast majority of police officers, they're great folks. They do a lot for the community. That's not really the issue. It's more so the bad apples who have committed violent acts against people that they're really sworn to protect and serve. How do we approach this issue, and what legislation would you support to defeat police brutality?
Yeah. So I want to first acknowledge that a lot of the problems that we face as a society, we tend to dump on law enforcement and schools. And, you know, when I watched that video of George Floyd in his final moments crying out for his mother, I mean, I think that was a huge rallying cry for everyone who's ever been called mom. And I don't want my child or anyone's child to ever go through that. And so that's an obvious no-brainer. Let's not ever allow chokeholds. You cannot kneel on someone's neck until they die. Like, these are basic human dignity things that we need to address. And then I think when you look at, like, the case of Breonna Taylor, that's an example where she and her boyfriend both have the legal right to bear arms and to use deadly force if someone breaks into their home and they feel threatened. Well, our police officers also have a legal right to use weapons and use deadly force when they are being threatened. And I think that it is the responsibility of our legislators to look at where there are areas of conflict in the law and remove that conflict. So, let's stop doing no-knock warrants unless there's an imminent danger of someone's safety in that home. And I think that the point of the government, in my opinion, is to help create equality. And so when you have a system of inequality, that is a point where we need intervention to right that injustice.
Yeah, now, I know we're running a little bit low on time, so I want to get to this here. I mean, what are your thoughts now? Because we're looking at the presidential election, and we got a lot of also key races in the Senate. The majority is up for grabs. A lot of just key races around the country, as I said, in Maine, South Carolina, Iowa, Arizona. So what are your thoughts on just this really test that we're going to be having here over the course of the fall, just of these two major political parties? We're really seeing right now where America stands on them, both on the Republicans and the Democrats. What do you think about that? And then as it relates to, the presidential race, I mean, how does Joe Biden compare to President Donald Trump in terms of his platform and leadership? We've spoken a lot on Trump's leadership, but how does Biden stack up in comparison?
So when I think about where we are as a nation, I think that a lot of people are suffering right now. And when I think about who of these men is able to have empathy, who understands suffering, I think that that person is Joe Biden. I think that we are all yearning for calm and decency and someone who will stop pitting us against one another over and over again. I think that we need a president who is bigger than his party, and we need someone who is willing to lead America and not just one party, because we are all Americans and we all want predominantly the same things. And I think that is incredibly important for us to have right now. And once we get past just the bitter partisan divide, then let's start electing people whose motivation is serving the people of their district, not staying in power, not padding the pockets of their campaign and taking massive campaign contributions from special interest groups and corporate PACs. Because when we look at why is it that nothing gets done in Washington? Everybody agrees that every person is going to need health care at some point, but nothing ever gets done. And why is that? Well, if you look at our Congress members, a whole lot of them, and not just Republicans, a whole lot of them are taking corporate PAC money from pharmaceutical industries and other special interest groups within healthcare. And I think that is wrong. I think I think we need to have people who are beholden to the people in their district and not just beholden to their corporate donors.
And that is a good way to end it off. That is Celeste Williams. If you live in the 3rd Congressional District in the natural state, you will see her name on the ballot. She's running for Congress against Republican Steve Womack and Libertarian Michael Colegius. We appreciate your time, Ms. Williams. Welcome back into Election Night Live. Speaking of that race, we have some news on that. But first, I want to go to Ben Martin. He is at our big board with the latest numbers on the presidential race between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Ben, what have you got for us?
Yeah, so the latest news is Trump has won California, Oregon, and Washington. Those are pretty much gimme states. I was expected that he would win those. But currently, Trump is in a narrow lead with 112 electoral votes.
So are you saying that Biden's won those states?
Yes, Joe Biden has won these 3 states.
All right. So, and, just going down the lines of this, there is no surprises really on the map among reported states right now. Is that correct?
Yes, so far everything's pretty much down the aisle.
So I want to talk about the situation in North Carolina and in Florida. We've been monitoring it all night. I want to first start with Florida right now. I'm looking AP reporting. Again, these results come courtesy of the Associated Press. It's got Trump ahead with 51.3 against Biden's 47.8, saying that it's 98% reporting. Ben, what would that do to the election map if Trump holds to win the Sunshine State?
Yeah, so if Trump holds in Florida and wins, it's going to bring him up to 141 electoral votes. That may happen given his narrow 3-point lead in Florida right now.
And then looking at North Carolina, this is also another state that we've got a lot of numbers on. AP says 94 reporting, Trump 50.1 and Joe Biden at 48.7. It's still really close, but Ben, what would the map look like if Trump won North Carolina?
Yeah, so similar to Florida, if Trump wins North Carolina, it's going to bring him up and give him quite a lead on Joe Biden.
Yeah, so now let's look, let's say Biden wins North Carolina. What would that do to the map?
Now, if Biden wins North Carolina, it's going to level things out a little bit. It's going to give Trump a bit of a lead, but it's going to be closer than it was.
So, yeah, that would get Biden 224, close to the road to 270. Looking at this, you got to think if he can take Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, he's in a really good spot to get 270. Is that correct, Ben?
Yeah, so if Biden wins Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, it's going to put him in a really good position. He'll be right at 270.
Yes, so anything that we should expect within the coming hour, Ben?
Right now, it's hard to tell, although Florida, South Carolina, and Ohio are currently leaning for Donald Trump. So it is possible we will see a Trump victory in Ohio.
Very much, and we'll keep you guys updated throughout the night on this. Now we want to talk about the Arkansas 3rd Congressional District race. It's one that we mentioned at the start of the show, and we just showed the Celeste Williams interview. Steve Womack, the Republican congressman, he's been in Congress for 5 terms. Well, he just won a 6th, defeating Celeste Williams and Michael Colegius with 63.8% of the vote, AP reporting. So now we also got a chance to talk to the congressman. Here's our interview with Steve Womack. Now we welcome Arkansas Congressman Steve Womack to the show. The Republican congressman has represented Arkansas's 3rd Congressional District since 2011. Before he was elected to Congress, he was the mayor of Rogers from 1998 to 2011. Welcome to the show, Congressman Womack.
How are you? Great to be with you.
What are the 3 most important issues in this country, and why and how do we need to address them?
Well, it's a great question, and if you ask that question of virtually anybody, you'll get a variety of responses. To me, right now, it's the number one long-term issue affecting our country. It deals with what I call the body politic, and that is the divisions in politics that are so acute today, and I call it shirts and skins. You could also call it the my way or the highway politics, that the inability for the Congress of the United States, made up of all shapes and sizes, all kinds of political stripes, from the hardcore progressives to the Freedom Caucus, that the divisions are so profound that we can't even sit down at the table and come to agreement on the most fundamental of our duty. So I believe job one is to get the Congress back in such a shape that you can settle your differences by having an adult level conversation at the table and try to figure out what are those things that we can come to agreement on. And there's no better example of what I'm talking about than the federal budget. You know, and I chaired the budget committee back in 2018, and I've been the ranking member on the budget committee since then. The budget is probably the most fundamental of the duty of Congress. Most fundamental. I mean, who doesn't do a budget? Well, your federal government hasn't done a budget in the last 2 years. In fact, many years. The last budget that came out of the budget committee was my budget for fiscal 19. So at least when I was chairman, we were able to produce a budget and get it out of committee. Now, once it leaves committee, it's kind of out of the chairman's hands. It's in the hands of leadership as to whether it goes on the floor or not. But suffice it to say this, that the divisions of the body politic are so profound today that you can't even do a doggone budget. And that means that you're kind of pulling numbers out of thin air to mark appropriations to keep the wheels of government turning. And that's not the way the framers had it in mind. It's not the way the 1974 Budget Act was designed. And we have a real desperate need to fix the body politic, so maybe we could start doing at a minimum the most fundamental of our duty. And then if we're successful there, maybe we can start attacking some of the other critical issues facing our country that are a lot more complicated. And I can go into those. So that's number one. Number two is national security. And it reads in the Constitution that part of our job is to provide for the common defense. And this is an unstable world. It's a lot more stable now than it once was. But let me tell you, we got a lot of people that have their objectives set on disrupting democracy around the globe, and there's no better example of democracy than what the United States stands for. So I would just tell you from a national security standpoint, in the near term, it would be, whatever Iran might do, or maybe what Russia might do to Eastern Europe, or maybe ISIS and remnants of ISIS and some of the other rogue groups that can kind of disrupt things around the planet. But in the long game, it's all China. China, China, China. It's the Indo-Pacific region where there's a lot of, it's a peaceful situation right now, but it's kind of like détente. It's kind of uneasy. We know that China is playing a really long game from an economic perspective, involving itself in a lot of places around the globe. And I want the people listening to this to understand that that's not because they just have an interest in becoming an economic power. It also provides their ability to improve military infrastructure and strategic weapons and activities in space and on and on and on, to basically become the supreme power in all of the world with an authoritarian regime. So I think that what's going on in China, both from an economic perspective and a military buildup perspective, should be of concern to everybody listening to this cast here today. So, the divisions body politic is kind of at that really 30,000-foot level, a little closer to the surface of the earth is what's going on in China, both from an economic and military perspective. And then beyond there, man, you can fill in the blanks a lot of different ways. Some people would think it's civil unrest. Some people would think that it's infrastructure. Others would say immigration. And I mean, you could just pick from the menu of different issues affecting our country. If I had to settle on the third, it would be deficit and debt. And I might even want to elevate it above China, although I'd be hesitant to do that today. But deficits and debt matter. The country is on a unsustainable glide path right now. We're $27 trillion in debt. We're going to add $3+ trillion to the deficit, to the debt this year because of COVID, and we're going to add a couple of more trillion next year. And there's no real appetite in Washington for getting our arms around the fiscal glide path of our nation. And everything has to be on the table. There should be nothing. When you're $27 trillion in debt and you see insolvency coming in 2024 for Part A of Medicare and in 2031 for Social Security, then you better start paying attention to your spending, or else you're going to run up against another cliff, and you're going to have to do something in haste that's probably got some draconian type, atmosphere around it. So, those would be my top three. There's a whole lot of other things that we need to be dealing with as well. So the job of Congress is pretty complicated right now, and no easy solutions.
Yeah, and lastly here, this is my final question for you, Congressman. Looking at the election, what is at stake here? I know that both the White House and the Senate majority are really, really up for grabs, but when looking at this, why do you believe voters should consider electing or re-electing conservatives and Republicans over liberals and Democrats?
Well, because I think the real change that is the real crossroads we're at right now is America going to become more of a socialist-leaning country where it's bigger government, higher taxes, more regulations, and government knows best? Or is it going to be a federal government that believes in lower taxes, fewer regulations, and the empowerment of the private sector to drive jobs and economic prosperity? That second effort there that I talked about, lower taxes, fewer regulations, empowerment of the private sector, more freedom, liberty, those kinds of things, that's what's made this country such a great and a very powerful country throughout the globe, and it's why so many other nations in search of democratic institutions have looked to America for leadership. That's the America that I think most of America wants to be like. But look, Ori, I have a front row seat to the discussions going on in Washington. I sit on the floor of the House every day, and there is an element at work in our society that's being financed and propped up by a lot of people with nefarious intentions about democratic institutions that are trying to change the direction of our country, that are trying to move our country more in a socialist direction, more of an authoritarian sort of regime. And if you peel back the layers of the onion on a lot of the people that are supporting this nonsense, then you're going to find that they are connected to organizations, countries, nation states, and what have you that don't really care about America. I think we've got to be really, really careful, and that's why I think this election is the election that's going to either push America further to the left because of the number of people that are getting elected to Congress and the Senate that have these progressive attitudes, or whether a center-right America, which we've always been, is going to still be in play. And so that's why I think this election is so doggone important. And that's why I'd like us to get out of the name-calling, out of the backbiting, out of the shirts and skins, and just sit down and let's talk about what did make America great. What was it? Go back to World War II. Why did Tom Brokaw call that generation America's greatest generation? He did it for a reason, because they responded to the authoritarian and aggressive regimes in Japan and in Germany, and they responded. Millions and millions of people answered their nation's call and went out and fought for freedom, and they were successful. And as Brokaw says, they won the war and they saved the world. And then what did they do after that? They came home and they built the doggonedest America you've ever seen in your life, in business and in industry. And it was all done based on this notion that we're America. We are different. We are free. And we're going to fight for those things. And it's not going to be about government. It's going to be about the liberty of the private citizen and unleash the ingenuity and the creativity of the people of America in an unbelievable way. And the achievements that have been made in medicine and in science and in all these things have really benefited our country and indeed the world. And that's the country that we are still fighting for. And so I believe that this election, there's a lot at stake, and I want to see our country still headed down that path of freedom, liberty, the creative and innovative minds of the best and brightest that we have, the educational institutions, and continue in that particular direction. And that's the direction that I will continue to represent, and hopefully America's got its best years still ahead of it.
And that's a good way to end it off. That is Arkansas Congressman Steve Womack. He represents the Natural State's 3rd Congressional District. If you live in that district, which spans Bentonville, Fayetteville, Fort Smith, and Springdale, you'll see Congressman Womack's name on the ballot as he is running for re-election, running for his 6th term. We appreciate your time, Congressman. I think that we had a great conversation.
Lori, great to be with you. Make sure everybody gets out to vote, and if I can ever be of assistance from my end, please let me know.
All right, thanks, Congressman. We appreciate it. Now we got a few more results here to report, all locally in the state of Arkansas. For the Congressional District 1, Rick Crawford, the Republican, is running unopposed, so he wins essentially by default. In District 2, which was going to be a really close race between French Hill and Joyce Elliott, AP is reporting, with 88% reporting, that French Hill, the Republican, has kept his seat in the House over Joyce Elliott, the Democrat. So a big win there for Arkansas Republicans. As we reported about 10 minutes ago, Steve Womack has won the 3rd district race. They've upped his total now to 64.2% against Democrat Celeste Williams' 32%. In the Arkansas 4th District, they have Bruce Westerman winning with 69.5% of the vote over William Hanson, the Democrat. So Republicans all across the board have won all 4 House seats here in the state of Arkansas. Really not a lot of surprises there. The only one that was potentially going to be close was the District 2 race with French Hill and Joyce Elliott. And we can also report, we reported in the first hour, Tom Cotton has won re-election to the Senate, defeating Libertarian Ricky Harrington Jr. 81% reporting, it says 66.7% for Cotton and 33.3% for Ricky Harrington Jr. We'll go ahead now and take a quick break and come back with some more news and numbers right here on Election Night Live.
So electrical engineering is really about designing electrical circuits and the software that goes with them these days. So anything from cell phones to microwaves to Boeing 747.
When students come as first-year students, they will learn concepts in engineering. So that's the first year class, and then when they become sophomores, they will take fundamental classes.
All of our equipment is really focused on teaching. It's not so much focused on research, but really focused on teaching.
We do a lot of projects, a lot of class projects. We have a junior design project, a senior design project.
There are many tracks you can take, and many become engineers, but at the same time we have students who became teachers or who became business people.
So our graduates go to many well-known corporations. We think of Boeing, Lockheed Martin, IBM, Microsoft. These are where our graduates are getting jobs.
And we're not just focused on the engineering part, we really focus on developing the whole person. So the spiritual aspect, the emotional aspect, as well as the academic side of each and every student.
Faculty are interested in making disciples, not just engineers who make money, but engineers who can serve neighbors, love neighbors, and be a good representatives of Jesus Christ.
Hello, and welcome to the Post-Production Podcast. I'm Kiri.
And I'm Rachel. We are a student and a former student who think we are hilarious and also like to talk about our experiences in media production.
We're friends, too.
Sometimes.
Yeah. So on the Post-Production Podcast, what do?
We talk a lot. We'd like to share our knowledge with you.
Yes, advice you never asked for. That's our podcast.
Say one was interested in listening to a podcast about young adults in media. Kiri, where might they find Post-Production Podcast?
On Spotify and eventually Apple Podcasts.
If you're curious about what it's like to listen to 2 young adults ramble on about their experiences in media production, check us out on Spotify. Yeah.
At John Brown University, we know you want to be an expert professional equipped to tackle new challenges in your field or move in a completely different direction in your career. To do that, you need a trusted master's program built on the idea that learning happens in real life, not just the classroom. That's why we give both our traditional and online graduate students the opportunity to learn through real-life experiences. Whether you're conducting live therapy sessions at one of our community counseling clinics, developing a strategic plan for a project at work, or interning in your local high school, you'll have the opportunity to apply what you're learning through hands-on experience. JBU will provide you with the flexibility and support you need to balance grad school, work, family, and other priorities, as well as give you a Christ-centered education that prepares you to honor God and serve others wherever you are. Apply today using promo code GRAD2020 and take the next step towards earning your master's degree at jbu.edu/gradschool.
Young men and women.
I know things seem uncertain and difficult for you.
For us all, really.
However, I want to encourage each of you to continue working towards your athletic and academic goals.
I know the spring still seems like forever.
And in some ways, it is.
In the grand scheme of life, it's but a mere blip on your journey.
Stay focused and lean on Him, for He will guide you along the way.
Don't forget this time was taken from you and use that to fuel your drive.
Remember, your word is a lamp unto my feet
and a light unto my path.
I know this time is a heartbreak for all of you.
It is for us fans also.
I am not retired and I love watching basketball and soccer teams.
And even have begun watching the volleyball team last year.
We all pray for you and hope you can start your seasons as soon as it's safe. God bless.
This pandemic can't stop the energy and heartbeat of the JBU student athletes. You all rock.
Work hard, stay focused, never give up,
and continue to honor Christ in first place in all you do.
Live for Him.
Praying for each of you to prosper in your faith during times of testing.
It will make you better and stronger by the resistance you go through.
God bless you. Keep working and keep your eyes on Jesus.
Run the race set before you and you will overcome.
Remember, this too shall pass. Go JBU.
We just want to say thank you
for your encouragement, for your love and support.
It means the world, and we appreciate you all so much.
We can't wait to see you in the next semester.
We are so blessed to have such an incredible support system. Keep loving the Lord and loving JBU. Go Golden Eagles.
Welcome back to the Next Night Live. I have with me now Catherine Knoll. She's the executive editor for the Threefold Advocate, and we have a couple questions for her about some of the issues and everything that's going on with the Threefold right now. So Catherine, can you tell us how the Threefold has prepared for this election night? Yeah, so with the Threefold Advocate, we have a couple different teams that are involved with the student newspaper. We have our social media team, which is on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And then we also have our fact-checking team, which has gone through different segments of the broadcast to check the different statements that the speakers have said. And then we also have different students updating poll counts both nationally and on the state level. Okay, now I know that you and some of your other reporters have actually gone to polling sites and interviewed some of the poll workers or just people and the overall environment there. So can you please tell us how that experience was at the poll sites? Yeah, so this morning I had the opportunity to travel to 4 of the different polling sites in Siloam Springs, and a lot of the poll workers were really friendly and they were excited to see student journalists covering the local elections. And this evening I went with Maria Aguilar, who is our managing editor, to meet again with some poll workers that I had met earlier to talk about what they had seen with voter turnout. Okay, now I know that you said you are updating current things that are going on right now with sort of polling and results that are coming in. Could you please tell us what has the reaction been so far in the newsroom with a lot of the editors and reporters right now? I will be honest, it's been a little crazy, but everything's been going well.
in terms of watching the different polls and different predictions across the nation. We have different national stations on each of the TVs in our newsroom. So we follow both the presidential and also different national elections as well.
All right, awesome. Now we're actually going to head into a new segment that Catherine actually made for us. So here it is now.
We are here at St. Mary's Catholic Church, one of the polling locations for Siloam Springs. As Election Day draws to a close, we are talking with one of the poll workers about voter turnout during Election 2020.
I've been working with Benton County Election Committee, I guess now since about 1967, only when there are votes that take place. Sometimes once, twice a year, sometimes no years, just depends on when the elections are. My job is always to be the coordinator of the particular vote center. Like this is the St. Mary's Catholic, this is vote number 33 center in Benton County. So what my job is to coordinate the people, make sure their jobs, the machines are set up, that we have good traffic flow through, particularly in this election with the COVID-19. And everyone has been required to wear masks. I don't have, and I've worn this one and about 3 others all day long, and when the people go in, they do not have to wear masks to vote, but we encourage it. So that's why we have these gentlemen out here who are stopping the first flow of traffic and encourage them, tell them what's happening on the election. Inside we have people that are stopping and make sure they get their stylus, their ballot, and nothing is touched by the voter and nothing is touched by the poll worker. So it's been a fun day, it's been a beautiful day. The election was probably one of the largest elections in our U.S. history. However, there was so much early voting that it almost left nothing here. And we've had just under 200 people in this vote today. Normally in a vote we'll have 400 to 500, so about half of it. But I heard that happened downtown at one of the other 2 voting centers here, been about 50% what they normally are.
Thank you, Catherine. Now we're going to go back to an ad break, guys. So we'll see you back on the Election Night Live.
The Conversation is a podcast dedicated to long-form discussions with important public figures on the issues of the day, hosted by JBU student Ori Phillips. The podcast features long-form discussions with different local and national public figures, such as political commentator David French, conservative radio host Eric Metaxas, Arkansas Congressman Steve Womack, and more. New episodes are released on Fridays. You can listen to The Conversation on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Anchor, Breaker, Overcast, Pocket Casts, and Radio Public.
I would say that the value of living on campus at JBU is a very, very amazing communal experience.
You're so much a part of JBU culture and JBU student life by living on campus.
You really do build a bond with the people who you do live with, people who you interact with, you see on a daily basis.
You're in the middle of everything. Like I walk to class like so easily just coming from my apartment to like my other classes. And it's just given me the opportunity to feel like I'm in the middle of everything. I'm in the mix here at JBU.
We have an all-girls dorm and an all-guys dorm, and they have their unique kind of feel. But then we also have Hutchison Hall, and then there's also Walker Hall, which is another co-ed dorm. And so in each of those dorms, there is a unique feel, a unique kind of presence.
Your RA is your best friend and someone you can rely on and you can look to for not only just moral support, but also emotional support as well.
There's someone there that's consistent in that their job is to be there for you if you need something.
If I had to describe living on campus here in one word, it would be sisterhood. I've loved getting to know the girls that I live with on like a real personal level.
And so for me, I don't know how to imagine my life without living at J. Alvin. I know that I wouldn't have a lot of the friends that I have now. I think those memories are kind of the basis for so many of my friendships. I just think that the lack of intentionality that comes with that and just kind of the normal life that accompanies that is just so good and so helpful for building friendships that probably wouldn't be able to happen without that relaxed communal experience of living on campus.
Wilderness medicine is a specialized track in the Outdoor Leadership Ministries degree program, which ends up with students acquiring their wilderness EMT status. Partnering with Northwest Arkansas Community College, you start by getting the standard EMT license from the state of Arkansas. And then you'll do a bridge class that converts that EMT into a wilderness EMT. You will do the core of the Outdoor Leadership Ministry degree here because wilderness medical technicians are typically working inside of some other role. This specialization just gives you credentialing that would qualify you in a unique way for these roles. You might be a guide, you might be your entrance into Park Service jobs. It could be things as an educator, so wilderness EMT is qualified to be a wilderness first responder or wilderness first aid instructor. It also prepares you for some things that maybe you wouldn't necessarily think about. So humanitarian disaster relief workers, emergency medicine is one of the key tactical skills that get you into that field. We've tried to make it fit as many possible scenarios as a student might want.
Welcome back into Election Night Live. I'm Maury Phillips. We're nearing about the last 15 minutes of tonight's broadcast, but we still want to talk some more about some of the results we're getting in here. Now, we don't have a lot to report on the front of results for the presidential race, but I do want to get into kind of the ifs and ands and different scenarios there. So we got Ben Martin at our big board. We have Bella Bennett at the news desk with me. So we're just going to go through some of these states. We'll go through what we have right now. Obviously, we're going off of AP's report, the Associated Press. We've seen some results come in. I know that Fox, they called Florida for Trump, and I believe somebody told me they called Arizona for Biden, but obviously AP has not yet reported that, so we are not adding that to the big board yet, and we probably will not during this broadcast. So, Bella, first I wanted to go to you. What are we kind of looking at here regarding the situation in some of the swing states?
Right, thank you so much, Ori. So right now we're looking at a lot of mail-in ballots that still need to be counted. There are a lot of unknowns that need to happen. So Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Florida, Arizona, as you said, those are all some of the key swing states. We might not even know results until possibly tomorrow. Yes, and as I told Miguel Rivera, we're in for really a roller coaster ride. And again, we get the 3-hour experience. The folks at CNN, Fox, MSNBC, they get the 72-hour experience. So now we'll go state by state here, looking at Florida, the Sunshine State. AP reporting 98%. Trump is ahead 51.3% to 47.8%. I mean, Bella, I don't want to call it obviously, but we already, Fox has already called it for Trump. It looks like Trump is probably going to carry in the Sunshine State. Yes, that's extremely likely, and that was something that a lot of analysts were projecting already. Joe Biden has been leading in the polls leading up to the election, but only by a very small margin, so that's been a difficult state to call. But it's been likely, as analysts have predicted, that it would go red for Trump as it did in 2016, and that's kind of what we're looking at here. Let's go to Ben at the big board. So if this holds and Trump is able to win Florida, what does that mean for the count on the Electoral College?
Yeah, sorry, Ori. So as it stands right now, the electoral score is 209 Biden, 118 Trump. If Trump takes Florida, like the numbers are projecting, it'll be 147 to 209, bringing them far closer together, potentially bringing Trump within striking distance if he can take some of these swing states. And that big board there, courtesy of 270 to win. We appreciate them. Now looking at North Carolina, that's another state. Really, it's one that Trump has the slight advantage in, 94% reporting, but it's really close. 50.1% for President Trump, 48.7% for Joe Biden. I mean, it's within 100,000 votes. So this is really close. I mean, what can we expect from North Carolina? Is it possible that Biden could end up going out and making a last-minute move to win the state? Yeah, so Biden could absolutely win the state at the last minute. The thing with North Carolina, if there are enough outstanding mail-in ballots, they could be counting until November 12th is the deadline that they gave, which is 9 days away. So that's obviously a much longer time than some of these other swing states that we're seeing. It's a very, very close race in North Carolina especially, and that's kind of how it's been in the last few months the whole time. So Trump, again, is ahead, as you said, but Biden can certainly make a last-minute victory for that.
Yeah, and I will say, the final votes, it could be a couple weeks before they're all completely counted. But they should, I'm thinking in some of these states like Florida and North Carolina, they could maybe have enough to make a call by the end of the night. Obviously, we're going off air at 11 p.m., so we may not be on air for that call to be made. Let's go to Ben at the big board. In the case that Trump wins North Carolina, what does that do for the Electoral College?
That's right. So as the numbers are right now, it's possible Trump will take North Carolina, leaving us at 209 to 162 within just a few electoral votes of one another. So it's looking good for Trump if he wins North Carolina and Florida and continues to move up through the northern states.
Now I want to throw a curveball at you, Ben. What if Biden ends up making a last-minute move and defeating Trump in North Carolina? That would put him really close, or at least closer on the path to 270, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so if more ballots come in, as Bella said, later on through mail-in voting, and Biden does win North Carolina, it's going to put him at 224 against Trump's 147, which is far greater of a gap, but Trump could still come in with the victory if he goes for some of these other northern states.
Yeah, now looking at the Lone Star state of Texas. Early on in the night, it looked like Biden had the lead, but then Trump has since gained on him, and now what it's saying here with 78% reporting, the Associated Press saying Trump is at 52%, Joe Biden is at 46.6%. So Trump's not out of the woods yet in Texas, but it's still, it's a pretty comfortable lead, wouldn't you say, Bella?
Absolutely. Trump certainly has a very comfortable lead in Texas. Texas historically goes red, but, in 2018, it was a very close call with Ted Cruz winning the Republican Senate seat, but only by less than 2 or 3% than Beto O'Rourke. So Texas is going to be a state to continue to look at over the next few years in election cycles, and it's certainly still a close call there.
Yeah, now, Ben, looking at the map, if Trump is able to hold on, like the polls are saying, he might, and winning Texas, what would that do? I know that it would be a sigh of relief for Republicans because Texas would not be going blue. I know there's been a lot of speculation, as Bella said, with the midterms a couple years ago with Ted Cruz. If Trump holds on and wins, what does that do to the map?
Yeah, so it's looking like Trump may win Texas. He's got an 8-point lead with 87% of their votes reported. If he does manage to take Texas, which is likely, it'll put him at 185, Joe Biden at 224.
And then if you pair that with North Carolina, what does it do?
If you take Texas and North Carolina, it's going to put them within 9 votes of each other, Trump at 200, Biden at 209.
So very close then. Again, it's the road to 270. It's kind of a race. Now let's go to Arizona. That's a state that, as we said early on in the show, that Democrats have made a big push at in Arizona, typically a red state, trying to turn blue. Right now, AP 74% reporting, Joe Biden at 53.6%, and Donald Trump at 45.2%. Now, we were talking off camera. One of the counties, I believe it's Apache County, has not yet recorded anything. As of me talking, a few minutes ago, we were talking about it. And it's traditionally a conservative county, if I'm correct on that. But, Biden does have a pretty comfortable lead in Arizona. I believe it's a little over 8 points. What can we expect from that?
Yeah, so a lot of analysts have been predicting that Biden will flip Arizona. That's certainly been a really interesting state to look at. As you said, they typically go red. However, Biden has been winning and leading unexpectedly in the polls over the last few months. So it's honestly very likely that Biden is going to end up flipping Arizona. So we might not know until tomorrow even, based on whatever mail-in ballots are still outstanding, but Arizona is certainly an interesting state to keep an eye out for.
And in looking at that on the map, Ben, let's look and see. Biden takes Arizona, what happens?
Yeah, so if Biden takes Arizona, flips it blue, we're going to be at 220 to 200. Still within striking distance for Trump, certainly with some of these other swing states, but it does help Biden out.
So then looking at the state of Iowa, right now, AP reporting 85%. Trump is ahead 51.6, Joe Biden 46.7. So he's got about a 5-point edge. 85%. That's still not everything yet. But if Trump holds on, what does that do for the map, Ben?
Yeah, so if Trump manages to hang on to Iowa, it gives him 6 additional electoral votes. It's going to be 206 to 220, just within 14 votes of one another.
So then, going to Michigan, we're going a little more up north. Trump right now, AP 51% reporting. Trump at 54.3%, Joe Biden at 43.6%. But again, it's just over half. I mean, what is at stake here? Because, I mean, I was talking to Miguel Rivera earlier on, and he said, you know, Trump is in a pretty good spot if he takes either Michigan, Wisconsin, or Pennsylvania. But the big thing is, can he do it?
Right. So Donald Trump unexpectedly won Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, all three of those states in 2016. However, those states have historically gone blue, and Biden's been comfortably leading in the polls by about 8% in Wisconsin and Michigan and 5% in Pennsylvania. Obviously, right now we are seeing Donald Trump take a lead in all of those states. However, it's likely that we won't know results until either very late tonight or even tomorrow based on mail-in ballots.
And then, Ben, looking at the board, I want you to put in, you know, what would it be if Trump won Michigan, but also for Biden as well, because, again, this is a race to 270, and Michigan would be huge for either candidate to go in and win.
That's right. So with Michigan at stake, we have 16 electoral votes. If Trump takes Michigan, it's going to put him 2 votes against Joe Biden, given our current scenario. But if Biden takes it, it's going to enable him to pull ahead by those 16 votes, putting the score at 236 to 206.
Then looking at the state of Ohio, AP 94% reporting Trump 53.4%, Joe Biden 45.2%. Obviously, it's not been called yet, at least not by Associated Press, but it looks like Trump is going to be able to hold on to Ohio, a state he won in 2016. So what would that look like, Bella, for Trump's chances of getting to 270?
Right, absolutely. So it would certainly be helpful for Donald Trump to win Ohio. It does have a pretty decent share of electoral votes. However, it's not a make or break situation as much of those other states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin are.
Yeah, and then looking at the big board, Ben, what does it look like for Ohio? It looks like Trump's going to take it, so what effect would that have on the road to 270?
Yeah, so if Trump takes Ohio, it's going to put him within striking distance of 270, Biden lagging behind at 220 if the current polling data is correct. Of course, more votes will come in and this may change, but right now Ohio is leading for Trump, and this is what may happen.
And then looking at the state of Wisconsin, AP 71% reporting Donald Trump at 51.8%, Joe Biden at 46.7%. Again, 71% reporting, not enough yet to make a call. Bella, I know this is something a lot can happen still, but Trump, this is a very crucial state for him.
Yeah, it definitely is. You know, as we said before, similar with Michigan, Wisconsin was one of the states that Donald Trump won in 2016, but does not normally go red. Wisconsin has a huge history of going blue. And it's another one of those states where really we're just going to have to see how the mail-in ballots go and how many are still outstanding by the end of the night. That can really change the direction of who's winning drastically. So if Wisconsin right now has Joe Biden leading in the polls, or it has been up until tonight by about 8%, one thing to keep in mind is that the recent COVID outbreak in Wisconsin has brought satisfaction with Donald Trump and his approval ratings in the state down by a lot. So it's certainly extremely likely that as we see more mail-in ballots come in, those will be for Joe Biden.
Yes, and looking at that, Ben, what effect would that have on the road to 270?
Yeah, so if Biden manages to take Wisconsin, it's going to put both Trump and Biden within 10 electoral votes of one another, Biden having 230 and Trump having 240.
And then you give Biden Michigan, what effect would that have?
So if you take Biden and you give him Michigan, it's certainly going to be far better. Biden will have 246, Trump will have 224, which is far more comfortable position for Biden to be in.
Yes, and then now just looking at some of the states that are swing states, but we probably won't, in fact, we definitely won't know them by the end of the night. Looking at Georgia right now, 76% reporting. Trump ahead 53.3% to 45.5%, but I believe I've heard that we won't be knowing the results for Georgia tonight. I could be wrong. I could be incorrect on that. But, I mean, what importance does the state of Georgia have for Trump? I mean, that's one that it's typically a red state. You'd think he'd need to win that to get to 270.
Right, so Donald Trump might not necessarily need to win Georgia to get to 270. However, it's unlikely that Joe Biden takes the lead in that state. You know, Georgia is one of those states that's becoming more and more progressively a swing state, same with Texas. And though it is typically a red state, it's certainly one to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, and then lastly, looking at the state of Pennsylvania, it's a state that many have said is the most important here in this election. but we won't know the results there for a few days, it seems. Right now, what we have is 54% reporting by the Associated Press, 56.2% for Trump, 41.4% for Joe Biden. Let's say Trump takes Pennsylvania. Would that put him in an immensely better spot for 270?
It certainly might. So Pennsylvania is one of those states, as you said, a lot of analysts have kind of concluded that that is one of the key states to win this election. Again, as I said before with Michigan and Wisconsin, it's one of those states that Donald Trump won in 2016, but he would not typically win before. They historically vote blue. Joe Biden is also from Pennsylvania. He's done a lot of campaigning there, had a huge presence. So as we see the mail-in ballots come in, it'll be really important to keep up with Pennsylvania.
And then looking at the big board, Pennsylvania, what happens if Trump wins it?
Yeah, if Trump manages to take Pennsylvania, it's going to put him at 244, within 2 electoral votes of Joe Biden. And then if you take into account Georgia and he manages to take that, it's going to put him within 10 electoral votes of 270.
Yeah, and then you count in some of those states that we haven't put in, like Alaska, Montana. You'd think that that would also put him in a really good spot, perhaps, to get to 270, but it's the big question of, does that happen? So now, Ben, let's go back to the board. What happens if Biden takes Pennsylvania? That could very well be it for Trump, should that take place.
Yeah, if Biden takes Pennsylvania, it's going to put him at 266, within 4 electoral votes of 270. And then if you take into account Nevada, which is likely to be a blue state, it'll put him over the edge to win the presidency.
Yeah, absolutely. Then you look at Maine, you look at Minnesota. Those are also going to go blue. So, yeah, if he wins Pennsylvania, there's a good chance he ends up winning the election. So, Bella, this will be the last time we see you all tonight. Any final thoughts on the election, what maybe we can expect here in the future?
Right. So one thing that we can expect is to not know the results of the election before, very, very late in the evening, even possibly not until tomorrow. There's been a huge voter turnout with mail-in ballots this election, more than we've ever seen before, as well as a record high turnout in general has been projected. So those swing states will be really, really important to keep an eye on, and as such, they're going to be holding out on counting their ballots more than the other given states are.
Ben, any final thoughts?
Yeah, we're just certainly going to have to wait on those mail-in ballots to come in. So none of this is exactly conclusive, but you can get a pretty good idea of where the election might go over the coming days.
Yes, so anyway, looking now, we appreciate Bella Bennett, Ben Martin, and Lauren West. That is our analytical team. Looking at some of the Arkansas ballot issues, with 82% of the ballots counted, it appears that Arkansas voters will extend the half-cent sales tax for highways and approve a change in the state's term limits for office holders. However, voters appear to be rejecting a measure that would significantly alter the process and requirements for presenting new ballot measures to voters. So it looks like yes has won for issues 1 and 2, and no has won for issue number 3. We're going to go ahead now and take a quick break and come back and wrap up the show. Again, appreciate the analytical team, Bella Bennett, Ben Martin, and Lauren West. I'll be back with Armando in a couple minutes to wrap this thing up.
Looking for a better college experience? To do that requires transferring, but transferring can be confusing and seem difficult, which makes you feel even more stuck. At John Brown University, we believe transferring should be easy, so we provide an admissions counselor to guide you through the process. Step 1. Apply to JBU. After you start an application, your admissions counselor will be in touch right away. Step 2. See how your credit will transfer. Transferology is a free tool that will show exactly how your courses will transfer to JBU. Step 3. Submit a FAFSA and get a financial aid offer. Even as a transfer, you'll be automatically considered for JBU's academic and need-based scholarships. So, use the code TRANSFER to apply for free, and in the meantime, schedule an in-person or live stream visit so that you can avoid another disappointing semester and instead become a welcomed part of the JBU community.
Welcome back into Election Night Live. I'm Ori Phillips here. Before we end this show off, we're going to go ahead here going through the major Senate races. We already went through the presidential race, going through the major Senate races as well as some of the races here for the Congress here in Arkansas. Starting with the Senate race in Arkansas, Tom Cotton, as we said earlier on in the show, AP reporting, has won re-election against Ricky Harrington Jr. by a commanding margin, 66.7% for Cotton, 33.3%, I should say, for Harrington. It is worth noting that's a little bit higher than what the Arkansas poll had Harrington coming in at. They had him at 20%. Harrington, it looks like right now, has 33.3%, but it's at 81% reporting. Looking at the race in Maine, that's another very crucial race for Republicans if they want to keep the Senate majority. AP 58% reporting. Susan Collins has the lead 51.9%. Sarah Gideon is 41.8%. Something to keep an eye on there as we look on into the night. Lindsey Graham has won in South Carolina against Jamie Harrison, 56.1% for him, 42.5% for Harrison. So one of the most influential Republican senators in the country right now, and one of Donald Trump's biggest allies, remains in the Senate for another 6 years. Looking at Iowa, Joni Ernst is currently ahead, 51% to Teresa Greenfield's 46%. Ernst is a Republican, AP 89% reporting. So that's another big race. Ernst was polling ahead going into election night. If she can win that one, that would also be huge for Republicans. Looking at Arizona, right now Democrat Mark Kelly is ahead of Martha McSally. McSally is the Republican incumbent. That's another key race to look at when determining the majority right now. AP 74% reporting, 54.7% for Kelly, 45.3% for McSally. Meanwhile, in the state of Colorado, the Democrats picked up a big win. John Hickenlooper defeated Cory Gardner. Hickenlooper 54.4%, Cory Gardner 43.6%, so a big win there for the Democrats. With that said, they did suffer a setback in the state of Alabama as the former football coach, Tommy Tuberville, won the state there by a commanding margin, 63.4% to incumbent Democrat Doug Jones's 36.6%. Now looking at the natural states in the state house races, Rick Crawford wins District 1. He was running unopposed in that, so no surprise there. French Hill, he wins against Joyce Elliott for District 2, 55.7% for Hill, 44.3% for Elliott. Enough to call that one 88% reporting. Steve Womack took District 3, 64.3% for Womack, 31.9% for Celeste Williams. They made the call there, 68% reporting. And finally, take a deep breath, Bruce Westerman won the District 4 in the state of Arkansas against William Hanson by a commanding margin, 69.5% for Westerman, William Hanson with 27.7%. So Republicans keep all of the Congress seats, the congressional seats, I should say, and Tom Cotton wins re-election. Looking at the presidential race, it's still really close. Both candidates have paths to 270. Biden has some more paths than Trump, but obviously Trump has the lead in states like North Carolina and Florida and Ohio. So it's going to be something that's interesting to see, and we will see it play out over the next few days, I'm assuming. Armando, any final thoughts tonight before we wrap this thing up?
Nothing for sure, Ori, right now. It's just more that it's a close race. I am willing to see what will happen with the country and how we'll move forward from this definitely as well once the results do come in with mail-in ballots and other absentee ballots as well.
Yeah, and again, to watch some more of this, a lot of the national news sources, they're still picking this up. You got Fox, you got MSNBC, you got CNN, all the mainstream sources and all the major channels as well. So there's plenty of ways you can pick up coverage of the election. And again, as the analytical team said, this will play out over the coming days. States like Pennsylvania and Georgia could very well decide the election, and we won't know them tonight, barring something huge. So anyway, that will do it for Election Night Live. We hope you enjoyed. We had a lot of great reporting, some great work by our analytical team as well, some really good interviews. Again, we appreciate everybody involved. We appreciate 270 to Win for giving us the big board. We appreciate CNN and PBS for the footage as well that we incorporated into some of our segments. Appreciate the Threefold Advocate, the JBU Common Department, the JBU Political Science Department, Golden Eagle Productions, and IMX for all of their help and work and support. And Armando, I think it was a good night, a good broadcast.
Yes, for sure indeed, Ori. Well,
so that will do it for Election Night Live. I'm Ori Phillips. That is Armando Hernandez. Good night, everyone.